Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The passenger train slowed down. Bridges, houses, traffic lights flashed in the compartment window. Looking into the compartment, the conductor said, "We are approaching. Parking 2 minutes." The man put his things in a bag and left the compartment. Passengers with suitcases and travel bags were crowding in the aisle, preparing to leave. "Do you know where to find a hotel in this city?" asked an elegantly dressed man to the conductress. "I don't know," she replied. "Do you ask the cab drivers? Do they know?" "Thank you. Have a good trip." "Have a good trip." The man got off the platform and looked around. Night had already fallen on the city. The station building was faintly lit by lanterns. He passed by, turned the corner, but saw no cars with checkers on the roof. At a loss, the man stopped under the taxi stand sign. He had come to this unfamiliar city on very important business. Now he didn't know how much time he was spending here, but he was determined. He planned to finish everything quickly, so that his life's dream would finally come true. The man spotted a car that was shining its headlights on the wet asphalt, moving in his direction. He waved his hand, and the car stopped. "I'd like to find a hotel to spend the night," said the stranger to the driver, and he noticed a strange accent with which the man spoke not local or what. "Get in," the driver offered a ride. "You won't get there on foot, it's a bit far." The man sat down on the back seat, thanking the driver. "But I didn't ride for free," he warned. Yes, I have money. Don't worry." The passenger slipped his hand into his coat pocket and pulled out a colored bill. He held it out to the bomber. "But no Russian money?" asked the driver of the passenger. "Unfortunately, no. I've just arrived. But if it is possible to exchange it somewhere, I would be very happy. I only have euros with me, and I need dollars." The driver looked at the passenger carefully through the rearview mirror. Odd, even a little ridiculous, unsure. He had taken out a wad of euros and was now showing him, a stranger he was seeing for the first time in his life. Crazy or just plain stupid. Usually business travelers would kill themselves for the last penny and even ask cab drivers for a receipt to account for the trip. "I know where there's a money changer nearby." "Let's go," said the driver, and the car laced the body with wheels on the asphalt. After a while, the driver slowed down and without turning off the engine said, "Over there, on the corner, see, it's lit up. They change currency there and go. And I'll wait here." The passenger got out of the car, leaving his travel bag on the back seat, and headed in the direction indicated. The man did not hear how the driver quietly got out after him, and trying not to stop, followed the dark shadow on his heels. Not reaching a few meters to the exchange, the stranger stumbled. The laces of his shoes were untied. He bent down to tidy up his shoes when suddenly something heavy fell on his head. The impact sent a sharp pain through his head, and then darkness fell. The new day began with a ghastly rain, shining on the ground like a sieve of fall drizzle. Its droplets ooze across the window, casting a wistful glow. This fall the rains had been particularly frequent. It was as if nature was tired of the summer heat and drought, and now it was trying with all its might to get drunk with life-giving moisture. Adriana looked out the window, peering through the ladles of spray on the glass. Ethan had just fallen asleep. All night he cried, not knowing how to comfort his brother. The 5-year-old wrapped a piece of bread in a clean handkerchief, dipped it in the sweet tea, and brought it to the half-year-old boy's lips. On the bread, she said to the little brother in a quiet voice, "There is nothing else. Here, Mom will come and feed you." The child grabbed the roll with his mouth. The girl stroked his head. Gradually, the baby calmed down and fell asleep. Why hadn't she thought of giving him some bread in his tea before? She could have slept herself if he had calmed down and not cried all night. Adriana looked out of the window, standing on a stool. Her mother had left yesterday. She still wasn't home. Aunt Betty from the neighboring driveway showed up in the yard. The woman put the halves on the bench and began to dust them off, taking one at a time, and putting the clean ones into a neat stack. The girl watched her Aunt Betty. The kind neighbor sometimes fed Adriana, bringing her from the yard to her house. When her mother gave birth to Ethan, the girl stayed with the kind woman for a few days. Those were such happy days. Aunt Masha's house was always clean and warm. On the table was a vase with cookies and candy, and for dinner the neighbor cooked delicious meat cutlets with pasta. Aunt Betty also bought Adriana pencils and a sketchbook. In the evenings they drew together. The girl tried to draw her father, mother, and herself next to her brother. It didn't always work. Then Daddy was sad. Then Mom was ugly. And still she liked to visit her neighbor. At the end of the yard her mom appeared. Adriana rejoiced, pressed her face against the legal glass. Her mother walked shakily, barely moving her feet. The woman's hair was shot, and her cloak was all stained. It was as if she had been wallowing in the mud. "Adriana, are you boozing again?" shouted Aunt Betty to her. "Shame on you. You're a young mother with 2 kids." The neighbor began to shame the drunken woman. "Leave me alone. It's not for you to judge me," snapped Adriana's mother, and not a firm gate headed for her entrance. On the ears no, rushed to her neighbor. "Today you listen to me. You asshole." Ethan was screaming all night. A half-a-year-old kid in the arms of a 5-year-old girl for 24 hours. "What are you trying to do? Kill the kids? Back off. It's none of your business." Maybe it's none of my business, but I called the police and child welfare. That way you'll know when the kids are taken away. Maybe then you'll get your head on straight and start thinking. What was that drunk woman yelling? Try calling your apartment with all your stuff, your bedroom. Oh, you scared me. You watch yours. Didn't sleep in a drunken stupor. The neighbor came close to the woman, shook her by the shoulders. "Look what you look like. Look who you've turned into." After all, a beautiful woman was smart, working, and now you're a slut and an alcoholic. There's no other word for it. "Piss off," said the woman, pushed the neighbor, and entered the entrance of a 2-story wooden barrack. Sighing, Adriana climbed off the stool and went into the hallway. Now her mother would fall into the house, fall to the floor, and have to drag her to bed. She'd be lying in the hallway, unable to get up. As long as Ethan did not wake anyone, the girl thought. For as long as Adriana could remember, her mother had always been caring and loving. She worked as a nurse at the hospital. From work, she would run to the daycare center to pick up her daughter. And then they'd rush home together. Mom would cook dinner and Adriana would spin around her in the kitchen with her dolls. When Dad came home from work, Mom would set dinner on the table. Dad always joked around a lot. He was a very kind man and loved Mommy and Adriana. Most of all, the girl loved it when he rode her on his shoulders. They would also go to the yard together, and Daddy would swing her on the swings. One day, Adriana heard a noise in the big room and came running to see what was going on. Her father was twirling her around the room in his arms and kissing her, kissing her, kissing her. "Leave it. I'm getting dizzy," she asked, laughing. Dad put Mom on the couch, and he squatted down and stroked her stomach. "Adriana, soon you will have a brother," the man said, seeing that the daughter was looking at her and her mother with surprise. The girl sat down next to her. "Is he in your belly?" she asked her mother, and she did not answer, only smiled. "And in my belly, my good girl," Daddy said. "Soon he will appear, and you will play with him, ride him in a stroller in the yard, feed him from a spoon." Adriana pouted his lips. "I like to draw." "Well, can he?" "Not when he's little, he can't." "Then you'll teach him," Dad said. After a while, his belly began to grow bigger and bigger, turning into a huge ball. One day, the father found his daughter crying bitterly in her room. "Adriana, my daughter, what's wrong? Did someone hurt you?" He was worried. Daddy took the girl's face in his palms and looked carefully into her eyes. "Tell me who did it to you. I'll punish him too much." "Brother." The girl cried out in tears. "What brother?" Didn't understand the father, who's in Mom's belly. Adriana didn't stop. How could he hurt you? He was not born yet. The man stroked his daughter's hair, trying to calm her down. Let him not be born. Adriana, smearing tears on her cheeks. Why not? What are you saying? Don't you want a brother? I don't. Look how big Mommy's belly is. It'll burst like a balloon and she'll die. Adriana sobbed again. Her father looked at his crying daughter in surprise at first, but then he laughed and hugged her. It's silly. Nothing will happen to your mom, he said. You lived in her tummy first, too. Mommy gave birth to you, and now we're all together. The girl looked at her daddy incredulously. Surely she won't die when the baby brother is born, she asked. Of course she won't die. Don't even worry. A month later, together with Daddy, they took Mom and brother from the hospital. It was a very happy and joyful day. The day before, Daddy vacuumed the carpets at home and dusted, and Adriana, like a tail, followed him. And you will also swing him on the swing, the girl asked her father. Will you ride him on your shoulders and throw him up to the ceiling and then catch him? Adriana, he is still very small, and at first he will always sleep and drink milk and play. I didn't understand Adriana. When he grows up, he'll play. Take your time. Time, baby. Mom came out of the hospital with a blue whistle. Dad ran up to her, took the baby in his arms, and handed Mom a bouquet of flowers. He lifted the corner of the blanket and showed Adriana the baby brother. How ugly, the girl exclaimed. Is he going to stay this red for the rest of his life? The parents laughed. At home, everything revolved around the little brother. In the morning, her father took Adriana to kindergarten. And in the evening, when he brought her home, the first thing she did was to run to the crib where Ethan was sleeping. She would take his hand, run her little fingers over it, stroke his tummy. Her mother did not allow her to hold her brother in her arms, but she gave Adriana a bottle of formula. And the girl fed the baby, saying, "Eat every last drop. Then you will grow big and strong." One day, the father did not come to pick up Adriana at the kindergarten. All the children had already been taken away, and she was playing alone on the playground, always looking towards the gate. But there was no sign of her father. When it was already dark, the teacher took the girl home. The door was opened by a neighbor, Aunt Betty. Adriana ran into the apartment as usual, rushed to the crib where Ethan lay. The woman in the hallway talked quietly about something, and the teacher left. Then the mother came back. Her face was tear-stained. She collapsed helplessly on the couch and sobbed. Aunt Betty stroked the woman's hair and shoulders, calmed her down, saying, "What a grief. Lord, how is it to be alone with two orphans?" Adriana's daddy died in the service. He was a fireman. It was the day the vegetable store caught fire. May was dry and windy. The flames spread quickly through the building, covering the walls and roof. One of the floor joists collapsed, crushing a man. When he was pulled out, he was already dead. When Adriana's mother was told of the terrible tragedy that had happened to her husband, she completely lost her mind. She was thrashing around like a madwoman, screaming and sobbing. The ER doctors had to try their best to give her some shots and calm her down. On the day of her father's funeral, a neighbor's Aunt Betty sat at home with Adriana with a turret. While the baby slept, she arranged the plates on the table. "Bring glasses, baby," Aunt Betty asked the girl. "Otherwise people will come. And we haven't set the table yet." "Why would people come?" Adriana asked naively. "It's the custom. When a man goes to the next world, he is buried and then memorialized." The woman tried to explain. "What do you mean, memorialized?" The girl didn't stop, putting the glasses on the table. "It means that they eat, drink kissel, and remember the deceased with a kind word. And we also get kissel at the daycare center. We'll change someone too." Aunt Betty looked sadly at the girl. Smart beyond her years, Adriana waited for her answer. The woman hugged the little girl, pulled her close, and secretly waved away a tear. A tear rolled down her cheek. "My poor girl. Life is complicated, and it's hard for me to explain everything to you. Just remember that Daddy loved you very much and will always be watching Cloud how you live. He will also watch how friendly and smart you are, growing up with your little brother. So you never leave the car behind. Adriana did not understand anything from what the neighbor said, but decided that she would help her mother in everything, so that Daddy could see it on his Cloud and praise his daughter. Adriana's mother took the death of her husband very hard. She loved him very much from the school bench. She believed that fate had long ago decided everything for them and united them into one whole. When her husband was gone, she started drinking. At first, she drank in the evenings after putting the children to bed, sat in the kitchen with a bottle of vodka and a shot and cried, remembering such a short, full of happiness and love family life. And then some people began to appear in the house. They drank, yelled, sometimes fought. When her mother did not pick Adriana up from kindergarten, the teacher brought the girl home and told her to run, and I would wait for you to come out. Often the door to the apartment was locked from the inside. Adriana had to spend hours pounding her fists on the plywood paneling and shouting, "Mom, open up, it's me." Adriana's mother was either asleep, drunk on vodka, or having fun in the kitchen with her friends. Once home, Adriana sat next to Ethan's crib and talked to him. "Don't be afraid," she said to her brother, who looked at her with blue eyes. "Our mommy is just a little sick. You'll see, she'll get better and everything will be like before." Adriana learned to make her own formula, and when she wasn't, she heated a bottle of milk from the store in a pot of hot water. Days and weeks and months went by, and Clara did not stop drinking the opposite. Now the woman began to disappear from home for days at a time. She came back drunk to pieces, not thinking anything, and most often, barely entering the door, fell to the floor, where she lay until she came to her senses. One morning, Adriana went into the kitchen. Her mother was washing the dishes. It seemed to the girl as if it had become the same. There were no bottles or shot glasses anywhere. The kitchen table was clean, and even the gingerbread was in a plate. "Mommy, we need to feed Ethan," said the girl. "Now my good one will heat up the milk. You'll give it to your brother." The mother poured milk from the bag into a clean bottle and put it to heat it on the water bath. "Do you want some tea?" "Daughter, pour, please." The girl sat down on a stool by the table and took a gingerbread. She thought only about one thing: if only no one had come to visit her mother and brought vodka. Finally, everyone was fed. Clara started to get dressed. "Are you leaving, Mommy?" Adriana asked fearfully. She knew that Mommy would leave and then come back with a bottle, and she would be drunk again. "No, sweetie, we'll all go for a walk to the park together," the woman replied. We got dressed and let a blanket in the stroller. Overjoyed, Adriana started pulling clothes out of the closet, got dressed, and then popped the stroller in the middle of the room to prepare a spot for her baby brother. She didn't notice her mother lurking in the kitchen, pouring alcohol into a glass and knocking it over. A little wrinkled his nose. The woman looked out the window for a few minutes and then repeatedly splashed more vodka into the glass. Clara went back into the room to the children. Adriana was already dressed, and Ethan was lying in the crib. His mother had moved him to the couch and put him in a beautiful knitted suit with a bunny on the chest. Then the woman walked over to the surgeon and pulled something out of Beggar's crystal vase of candy. "Here," she held it out to her daughter. "Put it on and never take it off." In Adriana's hands was a braided cord on which hung a small wooden horseshoe. She obediently put the thing around her neck, but still she asked, "What is it, Mom?" In her mother's hands, she saw exactly the same pendant of a man on a braided cord. She was running her finger along the wooden horseshoe, whispering something quietly, as if she were talking to someone. The girl tugged at her skirt. "Mommy, what is this? Why do I have to wear this shoelace?" The woman squatted down in front of her daughter, looked her in the eyes with her alcohol-fogged gaze, and said, "These two identical pendants your father made long ago. When he and I started dating, he had one and I had the other. And now I want you to have them, Ethan. And I get it." Adriana nodded, though she didn't understand anything. But since Mama said so, let that horseshoe lanyard hang around her neck, especially since Daddy made it. Clara put the second pendant around her son's neck and hid it under the knitted bone. It was warm and dry outside. Slaga wanted the stroller in front of her, and Adriana walked beside her. Sometimes she scooted forward, bouncing, spinning. The girl could no longer remember when she and her mother had walked together. "Wait here," her mother said, and put the stroller next to the entrance to the store. "I'll be right back." When the mother came out, and in her hand she had a bag with a bottle and ice cream plumber, which the woman held out to her daughter. They took another walk in the park. Clara bought a ticket for the carousel. Adriana waved cheerfully to her mother, sitting on the horse, and the latter strolled beside her. Katia had the stroller with Ethan sleeping in front of her, and then the mother put Adriana on the bench, put the stroller next to her, and gave the girl a handful of candy. "Sit here and don't go anywhere," the mother told her daughter if she woke up. In the pocket of the stroller, a bottle of milk. "Roger me." Adriana nodded. She watched her mother walk away from the park for a while, and then she was distracted by the children playing ball in the playground. She wanted to run with them, too, but Adriana couldn't move away from the stroller where her brother slept. Time passed, and Mom was still gone. Passers-by sometimes came up to the 5-year-old girl and wondered why she was alone with a baby. "Where are your parents?" strange uncles and aunts asked. "My mom will come soon. She went away for a minute," answered the girl. But Clara was still not there. There were fewer and fewer people in the park. Ethan woke up and cried. Adriana rolled the stroller back and forth next to the bench to calm her brother. She was looking toward the end of the alley. When would her mother's figure appear there? The girl gave Ethan milk from a bottle. Having eaten, he poured the edge of the diaper in his hands and looked at his sister, who was already ready. He burst into tears. Finally, she got up resolutely and wanted to leave the park. Should she go home? Mom is probably there, she thought. But at the same moment, she sat down on the bench again. The girl was used to obeying, so she decided since her mom said to wait here, then she should wait. She took out a candy from her pocket, as suddenly she heard a voice. "Whose girl is this?" Next to the stroller stood an elderly man with a broom in his hand. "Mommy's," Adriana answered timidly. She was tired, very hungry and very upset by her mother's long absence. "Why are you sitting here alone all day, Betty?" asked the park worker. Apparently it was a watchman or a janitor. "My mom and my brother and I came for a walk, and then she left and said she'd be back soon. I wait and wait and wait, and she's still gone." And then all the tension, worry and fear came out in a flood of tears. Adriana cried, and Ethan cried after her. "What's wrong?" The older man sat down beside her on the bench and stroked her hair. "Come on, don't get wet. Will your mom be found? How long has she been gone?" "I don't know," the girl went on, the man sobbing. Looking at her, hesitating, he scratched the back of her head with his hand, then said, "Come on, let's go. I know where we can get help finding your missing mother," he added. "Come on, don't be afraid." With one hand, he rolled the stroller down the alley, and with the other, he held Adriana's hand. They came to a small wooden building at the back of the park. The man put a broom at the entrance and led the girl inside. He rolled the stroller with the child and called out softly, "Ward, come here." A woman in her 50s came out at the man's call. She was dressed plainly with her hair in a bun at the back of her head and thick lens glasses on her nose. "What do you want?" "Look, I was walking down the alley to close the gate to the park, and she was sitting on a bench with a stroller, rocking her baby, saying she was waiting for her mother. But I've been watching them for a long time. They came to the park at lunchtime and have been sitting there all day." The woman scrutinized Adriana, then shifted her gaze to the sparrows and the boy screaming in the stroller. "Are they lost?" she asked. "No, we were waiting for Mommy," Adriana replied. After calming down a bit, She said she would be back soon, but she didn't come. The woman bent over the stroller and pulled out the baby. "Jesus, he's all wet on this how," she exclaimed, feeling that the boy's onesie and blouse were wet and dirty, something to change into. Adriana bent under the stroller. On the open partition was a tropical bag containing a diaper change and a pair of pants. She handed it to the woman. "Call the authorities, Walter." They undressed the baby right on the table, where there were mugs and papers, she said. "What's there to say?" Walter didn't understand. "Just say that you found the kids in the park. What else is there to say?" "Shit." The man thought I'd take it easy on my shift or watch TV. He took a pen. "My old lady doesn't let me have a drink at home, and that Yushkin. That's how it turns out. Now we'll have all night to testify. Where did you get the kids? Who are they? Where did the mother disappear to? How the hell should I know?" Continuing to grumble, Walter went to the telephone and picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is the City Recreation Center. My name is Walter. I found some children in the park. I've got an older girl and a very young boy. Of course, we'll be waiting for you." The man hung up. "They said to wait," he said. "Ward." Some of the men looked at him questioningly. "Where are we going to go now? We won't kick them out into the night." Soon the police entered the room, a man and a young girl in uniform. Adriana looked at them with all her eyes. She knew that the militia took bad people away. She didn't understand why these men had come for her and her brother. The policeman questioned Ward, but also Walter, then said, "We are taking them away. If the woman's mom shows up, let us know. And tell her that the kids have been taken away by the B306E Police Department." The park workers nodded, saying, "Of course, we will do everything as it should be done." She felt a lump coming up to her throat. She held on with all her might. She was put in the back seat of the car, and the uniformed girl sat next to her, holding Ethan in her arms. At the police station, Adriana was asked various questions for a long time. "Where is your mom? What is her name? Where does she work? Where do you live?" But the girl could not answer anything. She didn't know the address. She only said that her daddy had died and her mom used to work at the hospital. Only she doesn't go to work now because she has to sit down. "Do you and your brother have grandparents?" The policewoman asked her. "No, only Aunt Betty," Adriana replied. "She comes to us when Mom is drunk and brings us food." "I see." The girl pressed her lips together and looked meaningfully at her colleague, who, sitting at the table, was drawing up a protocol. Again, a socially dysfunctional family. Calling the guardianship of someone from the Department of Juvenile Affairs. "We will determine." And yes, call the desk clerk. Have him put it in the incident report and disperse to the other precincts. If the woman's a drinker, maybe she's out on the street somewhere. Adriana was very tired. She wanted to sleep, and her stomach lurched unpleasantly with hunger. The girl handed her a glass of tea and a cookie. After a while, Adriana fell into a shallow, disturbing dream in which she saw her mother. She was walking through the fields of the park. Getting farther and farther away, the girl wanted to run after her, but her legs were cotton and did not move at all. Adriana woke up when the room became very noisy. Strangers were talking about something, pulling out papers and writing on them. And then they took Ethan and left. "Don't worry," the uniformed girl said. "Soon they will come for you." The girl didn't understand who was coming for her. What worried her most was that Ethan wasn't around. Her mother would scold her for losing her brother. In the morning, Adriana was brought to the orphanage. First, she was examined by a doctor. Then an aunt took her by the hand and took her to the shower room, washed her, and gave her clean underwear and her left robe and pantyhose. "Let's get dressed and come with me. I'll feed you," the woman said. "You are hungry." The girl nodded her head at the spacious dining room the nanny led her to. There were several small tables with stools, just like in our kindergarten, Adriana thought. She sat down at the table, on which the nanny put a glass of cocoa. "Eat your porridge and bun. Soon all the boys will wake up and come to breakfast. Then we'll get acquainted." The nanny stroked the girl's head and sighed. Another orphan. What kind of mothers are these who don't want their own children? As the crowd of children rushed into the dining room, Adriana approached the nanny and asked where my brother was. How should I know? The woman shrugged. Probably taken to the orphanage. He's still very young. Adriana didn't know what an orphanage was, but she knew that Ethan was no longer with her. And that made her chest feel cold, sad, and scared. Meanwhile, Adriana's half-a-year-old baby brother was lying on the final table in the office of Kelly, the head of the infant home. Her assistant Cindy was feeding the boy formula from a bottle. Leaning over the baby, she could eat sweet. He's hungry. He's howling on the yard, but I don't understand what these mavets lack. Kelly was indignant. How many years I've been working at the orphanage, and every time they bring such abandoned children, my heart bleeds. And don't tell me, boy, you're so sweet. Cindy nodded her head. Eyes blue, hair light molting. He's healthy too. The medic said after the examination that he has no health problems. Develops according to his age. But his mother abandoned him. And where? In the street. You really could have brought it to the institution and given it up honestly. What if something happened to the kid in the park? What's it like to leave your baby with your 5-year-old sister? I'd force sterilize those moms, Cindy, so they can't have any more babies. Do you think she's gonna grieve? Run out and beg for her kids? No way. She'll make more kids while she's drunk, and then she'll abandon them. It's a terrible thing to say in the heat of the moment. Kelly turned away to the window, was silent for a moment, and then said, "Maybe it's for the best, though." Cindy looked at the superintendent in surprise. What good now to the orphanage, then to the boarding school? And then alone in the whole world will be. No relatives, no loved ones. And you and me for what? Asked Kelly, approaching Cindy, who had already finished feeding Ethan and was changing him into a clean onesie. It's our responsibility not to let this little man be lost in a big world without support. Do you think anyone will install it? Cindy was rocking Ethan in her arms. Once full, the child peacefully led the way. I don't think I know, Kelly replied firmly. I have a very wealthy foreign couple in mind. They've been asking for a baby for a long time. They live in Italy, very wealthy people, but they are not old. But that's none of our business. This boy fits their description, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They promised to pay him well. And when they get here, don't you dare. He blurted out that he had an alcoholic mother. These Europeans are very strong. They think that if the mother drank, the child won't do well. Let's hope they don't find the kid in another institution. But let's hope so. The morning was warm and sunny. Standing on the playground next to the sandbox, Adriana greeted the children. Mothers and fathers entered the wicket, leading their children by the hand. Hello, Adriana. They greeted the teacher, and she smiled and nodded her head. The first working week after the vacation began. For a whole month, the kindergarten where Adriana worked had been under renovation, and the employees were enjoying their vacation. Now everyone was all bundled up, and again will begin full of children's laughter, worries, activities with the little ones in life. The children also missed their teacher and happily showed the toys they had brought with them, although Adriana did not approve of it. She thought that there were enough dolls, cars, cubes, and constructors in the group. Besides, there were often conflicts between children because of personal toys. My daddy bought me a new doll, Lisa said, showing the teacher a new toy. Adriana remembered what had happened to the old doll that Lisa had brought to the kindergarten before her vacation. The girls had torn her head off. Oh, how hard it had been for the teacher because of that doll. The girls had fought in the locker room. Lisa even rushed her cheek, and a drop of blood appeared on the girl's skin. The headmistress then reported the girl as a delinquent. Do you know who her father is? One word from him is enough to get us all out of here and never be able to find work again, reprimanded the superintendent Adriana. Suit yourself. Now she's telling him not to complain. But these are children. Different things happen to them. tried to justify the teacher. Different things. But I don't even want to hear what Lisa's dad will say when you tell him that. Increasingly raising her tone, said the headmistress. I already called him. Soon he will arrive in his foreign car, accompanied by security guards, and we will not show a little. While waiting for the girl's parent, Adriana was worried, but when he entered the group, tried not to show any sign. Dad rushed to her father, Lisa. Look what they did to my doll. The man hugged his daughter, looked at her cheek. The scratch had been treated and a band-aid was covering the girl's cheek. I will take my daughter home, the man said. She'll be with the nanny for a few days. Yes, of course, Adriana nodded her head. She was ready to explain what had happened between the children, but the man gestured her to stop and added, Don't say anything. Just imagine if it was not a simple scratch, but a more serious injury. Where would you as a caregiver go right now? Michael, I always say don't bring toys from home. The kids have conflicts over them all the time. Shut up, a man yelled at her. It's your job to make sure these conflicts don't arise. Leaving the locker room with his daughter, he turned around and looked carefully at the teacher. Today I only warned you. Please think carefully about what I said. Adriana sighed and looked at the father and daughter. She was not afraid of this powerful and strong man. She just put herself in his shoes and thought, how would she act if something like this happened to her child? She'd probably be nervous too, maybe even swear and yell at the negligent educator. But Adriana had no children of her own. After leaving the orphanage, the girl entered a teacher training college to become a kindergarten teacher. Adriana always loved children. She constantly fiddled with the younger ones, taught them to draw, mold from plasticine, forbade pigtails to the girls in the boarding school, and the little ones reached out to her. All day long she played with younger children, which caused ridicule from her peers. Look, our Adriana is playing mother's daughter again. They laughed. Adriana, so you all their sons at once. The older kids jeered, but she didn't take offense. She read books to the children, carefully opened at night if someone's blanket slipped, and in the morning she made sure everyone brushed their teeth and bathed. Sometimes she wondered if anyone cared for her little brother as well. Adriana never forgot Ethan. She was only 5 years old when they were separated, but she remembered her mother, their apartment, her drunken friends, and even her neighbor, Aunt Betty. Adriana also remembered that day in the park when she sat next to the stroller for a long time waiting for her mother. Growing up, she wondered more and more often why her mother hadn't come back then. Maybe something had happened to her. What if she was hit by a car and taken to the hospital? What if she'd been attacked by bandits? There must be some reason why Mom didn't go back to the park to pick them up. But with each passing year, Adriana realized more and more clearly that her mother had simply abandoned them. A year before graduation from the orphanage, when the girl was 15 years old, the head of the orphanage showed her documents, which contained scant information about the girl's mother, as well as the address where Adriana and her brother used to live. It turned out that the police managed to track down Clara, but immediately after that she was deprived of parental rights to both children. The woman was found drunk out of her mind on the street. She was lying outside a wine and vodka store, holding an honorary bottle of vodka. Passers-by were indignant. Where has this been seen? In the middle of the day on a busy street, a drunken woman sleeps. Someone called the police, and they took her to the police station. After hearing about it, Adriana decided to find her mother. The girl wanted to know where her brother was. She found the address of the barracks, which she vaguely remembered from her childhood memories. She went up to the second floor and knocked on the door. No one opened it. Adriana knocked a few more times and then went out into the yard and sat down on a bench. Jesus, Adriana, are you there? She heard a cheerful response. An old woman ran up to the girl. Adriana recognized her as her neighbor, who often took her to her house as a child and treated her with delicious gingerbread. She remembered how Aunt Betty had scolded her mother for drinking and going out, leaving the children alone at home hungry and unsupervised. I'm Aunt Betty. Don't you remember me? asked the woman, looking into the girl's face. I remember. Adriana smiled. Oh, why are you sitting here? Come to my place. Let's drink tea and talk. Aunt Betty took Adriana's hand. Where is Mom? Asked the girl, and felt how strange the word mom sounded. It was as if she was asking not about a relative, but about a complete stranger. Come, I'll tell you everything. Aunt Betty pulled her by the hand in the direction of the neighboring entrance. She put her arm around her shoulders and led her into her apartment. Nothing had changed in Aunt Betty's house. Even the furniture was in the same place and smelled the same as when she was a child. Adriana hesitantly walked into the room and sat down on the couch. Her neighbor fussed. She wanted to give Adriana something delicious. I'll put the kettle on now, she said. In a moment, the table was filled with sweets, cookies, gingerbread, simple sweets that Aunt Betty kept in case she had guests. Over tea, she began to ask the girl, how are you getting on, Adriana? No hard feelings. I'm fine, Aunt Betty. I'm fine. Soon I'll be out of the orphanage. I'll go to teacher training school to be a childminder. You love it then. No wonder Ethan was in your arms all the time, even though you were just a baby yourself. Do you know where my brother is? Adriana asked with concern in her eyes. The neighbor sighed, then chopped a corner of the tablecloth. I came to see you, Adriana, at the orphanage a long time ago. In a couple weeks, though. How did they take you, Ethan? They wouldn't let me in, said I wasn't related. Thank you for your concern. Adriana was anxious to hear what Aunt Betty had to say about her brother, and Ethan was trying to find one. After a short pause, the woman continued to speak. He was just a baby, so they put him in an orphanage. I went there, and I went to the head of the home, and she told me that Ethan had been adopted. How can I find him? Adriana was worried. There must be some thread to hold on to. There was no way. Aunt Betty cut off her faint hope. If a child is adopted, all information about his new parents and where he lives is classified. Just like that, you know. I wish I could find him. He doesn't remember me at all, does he? The girl asked. Surely, nodded the woman. How can a half-a-year-old child remember anything? And his parents hardly know that his adopted son has a sister. And if they do, they won't tell. Why would they? So I'll never see Ethan again. Adriana was upset. Life is long and unpredictable, the neighbor said thoughtfully. No one can know how it will turn out and what surprises it will bring. They were silent, drinking tea and thinking about the complexity of human destinies. At last, Aunt Betty broke the silence. Your mom is dead, Adriana, she said sadly. It's been a week since she was buried. The girl looked up at her neighbor. She didn't remember her mother well, but she still had a pang in her heart. It snapped, crushed her so that it was hard to breathe. She drank very heavily. Aunt Betty continued to tell her story, trying to choose her words so as not to hurt Adriana's soul. Drunken friends had started fires in their apartment a few times. The whole house was in an uproar. They went to the municipality, demanded to evict Slava from the house. But no way. Adriana listened to her, looking thoughtfully out of the window. Maybe it was for the best that their mother had left them in the park. Adriana herself is well-fed and clothed, doing well in school. And Ethan has parents now. I wonder if they take good care of him. Do they love him like family, she thought. Oh yes. Suddenly, the neighbor got excited. When we moved into your apartment after your mother's death, I found the photo cards, didn't I? I'll get them. I kept them. I thought I'd give them to you or Ethan someday. Aunt Betty left the kitchen and returned a minute later, holding the black and white pictures. She placed them on the table in front of the girl and sat down again. Adriana gently, carefully, as if she had something very valuable and precious in front of her. She took the pictures in her hands. There they were, Dad, Mom, and her. And on the other photo, father and mother together, mother in a wedding dress and focha, and father in a suit and tie. Young and very beautiful parents were smiling, looking very happy. And in this picture, Adriana and Daddy are next to the stroller Ethan was sleeping in. Do you know that Arisha suddenly said in a serious, firm voice, Aunt Betty, go to the council, claim that you are the daughter of the deceased Clara, so that the apartment will stay with you. If you get out of the orphanage, where will you live? I kept all my documents. I have them here. I think our barracks is going to be demolished. Maybe you'll get a comfortable apartment. Thank you, Aunt Betty. Adriana thanked her neighbor. I'll be sure to go. The woman went into the room and brought a cardboard folder. She handed it to the girl. Here is everything, documents and everything, that I thought you might remember. I don't know why I put a fireman's badge there, which was left by your father, and his certificates for excellent service. Can I have more pictures? Adriana asked. Oh, really, baby? Of course, take them. I was saving them for you. The neighbor reached for a nail on the wall. But the keys to your apartment are the spare ones. I've always kept them with me. Thank you. Adriana thanked the woman once again. They hugged each other tightly, and the girl left the apartment. Looking out the window as she walked slowly across the courtyard, Aunt Betty crossed herself. Her figure, God take care of you. Girl, the first day of work after vacation went well. Apparently, they missed each other. The kids had fun playing. They didn't even fight. Adriana also had time to have a good rest and started her duties with enthusiasm. She had a preparatory group, and she needed to study more to prepare the children for school. After breakfast, she repeated with the children the alphabet and numbers up to 10. And then she took the children for a walk outside. While the children played, Adriana and 2 other teachers from other groups were talking on the sidelines. Throw a stone. Adriana's colleague Kathy immediately shouted when she saw that their boy had picked up a beach from the ground and wanted to throw it at one of the children. I'll put you next to me now, and you'll stand the whole walk. Punished. The boy put the stone on the ground and ran away. I'll sit with them. They're not kids, they're just punishment. Theatrically raising her hands to the sky, said Kathy. But why the vacation ends so quickly? And do not say, supported her Christina. My friend and I went to the South for 2 weeks. Girls, I tell you, there is no better place to have a great romance. No, men at the resorts around us like bees were born. I don't get it. Christina, how do we manage to roll around in resorts on a kindergarten teacher's salary? Kathy asked. If it weren't for my husband, I would have starved to death on those pennies alone. Yes, you just do not understand anything. Moore's teacher raised a finger up Christina. At the resort is not money is the most important thing. Yes, I wonder what is. No, well, of course, you have to buy a plane ticket, book accommodation. But all this can be done in advance, so as not to spend vacation money later. Christina sighed and folded her arms across her chest. At the resort, the girls are the onions. What Kathy didn't understand, dragging her eyes to her mate and coworker. What onions are onions? Oh, you're a dark one, Kathy. Sitting with your husband in a paneled 2-bedroom. You don't go anywhere. Work, home, home, work. And people have long since learned to live in a new way. What's onions got to do with it? The teacher wouldn't stop. Onions mean image. What image will you create for yourself? That's how you'll spend your vacation at the sea. That's what you should spend your money on. Nice clothes, makeup, manicures, and rejuvenation treatments. You too should see a beautician, by the way. Before Christina could finish, Adriana and Kathy laughed. Christina looked so smart when she was giving advice. She was still single in her 40s. And she, not at all embarrassed, continued to share with her friends the secrets of winning suitors. I'm here before going to the resort, went to a familiar beautician, said Christina, as if by accident showing the new fashionable manicure. So, she recommended me a beauty injection. It's like magic. It instantly smooths out wrinkles like they never existed. So where did your beautician inject you? Kathy asked with a laugh. Here, Christina pointed at the manicure with her finger on the forehead, between the eyebrows. A friend of mine has noticed that wrinkles are appearing on her forehead. They really ruin the look of her face. Not to mention they give away your age. Now you've got a forehead, eyes, money like a young girl. You should get that treatment too. Kathy took a small mirror out of her pocket and looked into it. There was indeed a small crease on her forehead. The woman wrinkled her nose, then ran her hand over the wrinkle. "What did I tell you?" With a triumphant look, Christina triumphed. "Soon your man will tell you that you have aged and look like Baba Yaga." "Oh, come on," waved Kathy. But she stopped laughing and thought about it. "And you, Adriana, you should get your barrel pierced, too. You always look glum and disgruntled." "Oh, thank you, Christina. I'd better abstain so as not to walk around with facial nerve paralysis." Adriana politely but knowingly declined. "You shouldn't." "Oh, in vain, girls. You do not watch your appearance." Christina shook her head. "Women after 40, there is nothing left but to resort to the help of specialists, because nature at this age turns to us backwards, and to the young front. Don't be crazy." Christina was still trying to argue with her. "Kathy, there's nothing more beautiful than natural beauty. Listen to you, Adriana, and I should be getting our asses tightened and our breasts siliconized. I don't think that's gonna help you." Christina waved her hand. "You after work, like a horse at the races, agonizing to your boyfriend. And from Adriana in general, men flee like the plague. What's wrong with loving my husband?" Kathy argued, but Adriana stopped the argument with a glance at her watch. She said it was time to go to the group. It was approaching lunchtime. After work, Adriana stopped by the supermarket. On the way from the kindergarten, she suddenly remembered Christina's words for some reason. She was right about something. Adriana will soon be 45. It seems like a lifetime, but no family, no children. She gives all her warmth to her children, and when they leave the kindergarten, they'd probably forget about her. However, Adriana had a chance to get married during her studies at a teacher training college. She met a student of medical school, future surgeon William. The guy was nice, well-mannered, and smart. Everyone said that he had a brilliant future ahead of him. After graduating from the university, he was assigned to the Far East. That day, he and Adriana celebrated William's diploma in a small summer cafe. The guy took her hand, looked her carefully in the eyes, and asked, "Will you be my wife?" Adriana was confused. She liked William very much. She was afraid that his parents, who were also doctors, would treat her badly because she had been brought up in an orphanage. But they perfectly accepted Adriana. Never a word or a look did not express discontent with the choice of their son. She and William had noble and necessary professions. She raised children, and he saved people from terrible diseases. When William proposed to Adriana, she did not know that he had already been assigned to the distant Khabarovsk, saying, "I will think about it." She was almost certain that she would give a positive answer. Adriana had no reason to refuse William, but when she heard that they were to move to the Far East, she flatly refused even to hear about marriage. Not understanding why Adriana was acting like this, the young man tried to ask her what was wrong with the move. Then Adriana confessed she is waiting for her lost brother to grow up and return to her hometown. That way there's a chance they'll find each other again. And if she leaves, she'll never see Ethan again. "You just don't love me," William exclaimed angrily. The reason his girlfriend had voiced seemed to him of little importance. To destroy the union of two loving hearts, Adriana did not change the guy's mind. To prove that she loved him, saying "I'm sorry," she just left. William tried to call her several times, but then left. And she never heard from her failed fiancé again. As she was leaving the supermarket with her bags full of groceries, she hesitated and tripped over the curb. The bags fell out of her hands. Potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and sausage scattered on the sidewalk. All the contents of her bags ended up on the pavement. Squatting down, the woman rushed to pick up the groceries as she suddenly saw feet in clean boots and black pants in front of her. Adriana slowly lifted her head, looking up. Standing in front of her was Michael, Lisa's dad, who had broken a doll from the girls in the group a month ago. The man also sat down and started gathering potato tubers into a bag. "Hello, Adriana," he said. "What are you doing, Michael?" "I shouldn't be helping you pick up fallen produce. Something's wrong. The man you were holding had a bag with a broken handle." "Thank you," thanked Adriana. "But I could have done it myself." "I'm sure you could," Michael said with a smile. And she was quite Arabella in front of this solid, handsome man. "Are you going home?" "Yes," Adriana answered quickly, and then she thought, why was she reporting to him where she was going? The woman held out her hands to take the package from Michael, but he didn't let her. "Then may I take you home?" the man offered politely. "Your bags are torn, and it's awkward to carry them. What if I drop them again, and I'm not there?" The man's face was completely serious, even imperturbable, but his eyes were hidden by a cheerful amusement. Adriana was completely confused, frozen in indecision, and looked then at the bags in Michael's hands, then at him. Seeing that her daughter's teacher did not dare to agree to his proposal, Michael added, "I feel bad about that conversation. I feel guilty that I spoke to you so rudely when the ribbons of mortar fell down my cheek. So consider my offer a sincere apology. Come." He took Adriana under the elbow and led the beautiful black car. The driver jumped out of it and opened the door obligingly. The woman sat down in the back seat. Through the window pane, she saw the driver take the packages from Michael's hands and put them in the trunk. The car moved off. Adriana felt awkward at having taken advantage of the suggestion of the father of her pupil. He seemed to see the whole thing as a fun adventure. "How did Lisa behave in kindergarten today?" he asked. "That's a strange question," Adriana smiled. "Your daughter has impeccable behavior. I guess you just don't want to upset me." The man tilted his head slightly and looked at the kindergarten teacher. "There's her babysitter. She just has a barrage of complaints for me when I get home. Lisa won't eat her porridge. Lisa refuses to sleep during the day. Lisa stepped in a puddle and didn't say a word. Shoes." Michael laughed merrily. "The porridge, the afternoon nap, and the intended shoes are small things." Adriana smiled. "Much more important is how Lisa perceives her surroundings and people." "Really?" the man asked. "And how does she perceive it all?" "With curiosity," Adriana replied confidently. "In this case, she is simply studying the reaction of the babysitter. In this way, the girl is having an experience that fits into a simple pattern. If I do this, it will be like this. And I thought she was just messing with the nanny and testing her patience." The car pulled up in front of Adriana's driveway. The driver obligingly opened the doors and gave her a handshake, then took bags out of the trunk of the car. "It was a pleasure to give you a ride," Michael said, and shook Adriana's hand. "Sam will help you carry the groceries to the apartment." Realizing that it was useless to refuse help, the woman did not resist. "Goodbye," she said, and went to her entrance, feeling on her back the gaze of her father's ribbon. Stepping out of the elevator, she opened the apartment door with her key and let the driver in. He strode resolutely into the kitchen, put the bags on the table, and saying good day, departed. Closing the door behind him, Adriana kicked off her shoes and hung her coat on her shoulders. She looked at herself in the large mirror above the dresser in the hallway, and Marchenko on her forehead. Indeed, the woman thought visibly and ran her finger over the skin between her eyebrows where a not deep crease was visible. Christina was right. Adriana didn't do well with men. Everything in her life seemed fine. Aunt Betty, a neighbor in the barracks, advised her to go to the council to apply for privatization. A few years later, the barrack was demolished, and all the residents were given apartments in a new 9-story building in a bedroom community. However, by that time, Aunt Betty had already passed away. Adriana, who then lived in the dormitory of a pedagogical school, was very happy to have her own apartment. As soon as the settlement of the multi-story building began, she moved in and began to equip the dwelling. Adriana herself pasted wallpaper, chose furniture, bought dishes. She hardly knew how to cook. In the orphanage, they did not teach her how to cook, so in the evening she mastered recipes for different dishes, finding them on the internet. Sometimes her friends from the pedagogical school came to her, and they organized parties. Often the girls would come with their boyfriends and bring their friends to introduce Adriana. But she did not get anything special with the opposite sex. After getting a job in a kindergarten, the girl generally immersed herself in the process of raising other people's children and forgot about her personal life. After William's proposal to marry him, she realized that the man who would be next to her would always demand attention only to him. And Adriana dreamed of finding the brother of the most dear and beloved man on earth, her Ethan. Quiet hour in kindergarten was a time when the kindergartners could not only eat lunch, but also chat. And so it was this time. Kathy, Adriana, and Christina, seated around the table, shared news. Yesterday, I found a website. There are so many cool cosmetics, said Christina, chewing the cutlet. I bought so many things and masks and balms and rejuvenating creams. Good for you, said Kathy. Only you, when you meet men, leave your passport at work. Why is that? Christina didn't understand. And so that they did not find the year of your birth. Then no massage and fingers will not help you. Your young suitors will run away, shining heels. Kathy laughed merrily, and Adriana smiled, looking at Christina's upturned face. Kathy and Christina were always teasing each other, and it was amusing to watch them bicker. By the way, you're the one who doesn't care what you look like. I'm trying to stay on brand, Christina said, fixing her hair. Our brand 100 years on the market is a great slogan for you. Kathy continued to tease her pal. Or is it? Despite 100 years of experience, I'm still functional. Oh, really? Waved her hand at Christina's spirit. The woman wanted to change the subject. So she turned to Adriana. It's your birthday soon, isn't it? You're not wrong, Majeka. Without letting Adriana answer, Kathy said, it's not just a birthday. It's an anniversary. 45 Baba Berry again. How are we celebrating, Adriana? I wasn't planning on it. Adriana tried to shrug off her friends. Yeah, so we let you. Don't get your ears dirty. No, we'll celebrate properly, wagged his finger at Adriana. Christina. Why don't we go to a restaurant? It's been so long since my husband and I have been out. Did you forget to add that? Nowhere but the couch. Kathy. Christina interrupted. No, restaurants are no longer relevant. And anyway, it's boring, and there are no decent available men. And our Adriana needs to find a date. Adriana laughed. Her friend's plans for her anniversary were too serious. And she hadn't even thought about how she would celebrate the anniversary. Guys, I do not want to cook, fuss, think about how to have fun. I'll buy a cake, a bottle of wine. We'll sit around when the kids are in the group. Nothing like that, Christina willed. You don't want to organize anything. You don't have to. Kathy and I will organize it ourselves. Am I saying that right? Kathy had no plans for the party. She just wanted to go to the restaurant and have a good time. But the look and was so convincing that she had to nod her head. That's right, do what you want. Adriana agreed. She never celebrated her birthday, never invited anyone. Last year, she bought herself a bottle of wine. And from work, she brought a box of chocolates given by her coworkers. She sat down at the table in the kitchen and set the pictures she'd taken from Betty in front of her. She poured wine into a glass, drank it, and sank into the thoughts that were troubling her. For a long time, Adriana had searched for her brother Ethan on social media, but then she realized it was a pointless endeavor. If he was adopted, they could have changed his first and last name, and even his date of birth. Ethan might not have known he had an older sister at all, and she wouldn't even recognize him when she saw him. It had been so long since she had seen her brother. Plus, he was just an infant, and children change with age. Then Adriana decided to apply for a search for her brother to a famous TV program, but there was no news from there for several years. On her birthday, she drank wine alone and thought that maybe Ethan was just around the corner, maybe even in her town or one of the neighboring towns. and there was no way to find him. Adriana was brought out of her brooding state by Christina. She brought her by the shoulder. "Hello. Wake up. Charmed. Excuse me, girls. I've been thinking. We're asking you what to get for your anniversary. I suggest beauty products or a certificate to a beautician. Kathy says money. I don't even know." Adriana replied uncertainly. "That's what I'm saying. Why do you need money? Where are you going to spend it? Your salary alone is enough. There's always something to spend money on," Kathy decided to argue. "Oh, don't be ridiculous." Christina waved her hand at her unapologetically. "If you knew where to spend it, you wouldn't be wearing the same boots for the 3rd year. But you've got a nerve, haven't you?" Kathy was offended. "Girls, stop fighting and arguing over nothing. I do not need anything." Adriana tried to reconcile her friends. "I don't need anything." But active Christina could not be stopped. "Okay, let's not you, not me," she said to the couple. "Let's give Adriana a gift that she will remember for the rest of her life. I have an idea." The quiet time flew by. It was time to go get the kids out of bed and serve the afternoon snack. The women went off to their groups. Adriana spent the rest of the day working with the children in the group and then took them outside. It was a nice day. The children scattered around the plot, playing catch-up and ball. Gradually, their parents came to pick them up one by one, taking them home. When all the children were taken away, Adriana was collecting the toys left by the children. Suddenly, she saw Michael's father walking along the path with a ribbon. "Hello, Adriana." The man greeted her. "Good evening, Michael. And Lisa has already been picked up by the nanny," said Adriana, surprised that the girl's father came to the kindergarten, and even so late, when all the children were already taken away by their parents. "I know." The man stopped next to her. "I just really wanted to walk you home." "It's not necessary, and it's not convenient," Adriana said. She was confused, not understanding why her father had suddenly decided to take her home. The woman looked at the road. There behind the fence stood Michael's car, and next to it stood the driver waiting for the chief. "Don't refuse. It's my pleasure. And secondly, I would like to talk to you about your daughter," said the man. "It's very important to me." "All right," agreed Adriana. "I'll just go up to the group, take my purse, and lock the door. I'll wait for you at the car." Michael turned around and walked down the path towards the gate. When Adriana approached him, he opened the car door for her. "Please have a seat." He helped Adriana to sit down and sat down himself. On the way, the man asked the teacher, "How was your day, Adriana?" "Good. Nothing extraordinary happened. The children are healthy, active, no one had a fight." "And that's great," she replied with a smile. "What did my Lisa do?" Michael asked. "She is a beautiful, very well-mannered and bright girl." Adriana praised her. "It's true. I had no problems with her in previous years. I think you were worried about getting out." "It's not in my rules at all," replied Adriana. "I always try to tell parents everything as it is about their children. Although many do not always like to know about their child the opinion of the teacher, but I am interested." With enthusiasm responded the interlocutor of the teacher. "Your daughter is a non-conflict and inquisitive child, but in my opinion, she lacks female affection, communication." "Adriana, I apologize for interrupting you." The man looked her in the eye. "Let's take a walk. It's only a couple of blocks from your house, and the weather today is so conducive to walking." Adriana was surprised at the suggestion, but she agreed to walk. She got out of the car and walked slowly down the sidewalk. "Let me start by saying that Lisa is not my daughter." "Adriana, Michael. Whose is it then?" "My own little sister. When Lisa was just a couple months old, her sister disappeared, and then she was found murdered." "What a horrible outburst." Adriana's hands. "Yes, it was a tragedy," replied Michael. But Adriana opened her mouth, but the man beat her to it. "Do you mean to ask why she calls me Daddy?" he asked. "Actually, she does. On her sister's grave. I gave my word that I would raise Ribbon as my own daughter. I've never been married, Never had children of my own. At least I don't know anything about them. I just took care of the girl. Then one day she said her first word, and it was, Daddy. That's when I decided to let them think I was her father. That's an amazing story, Adriana said quietly, looking at the ribbon. You'd never think she was troubled or lacking affection, warmth, love. You make a wonderful father. Do you think they've reached Adriana's driveway yet? And the man stopped. He looked at her with his velvet brown eyes, and it seemed to her that he and Michael had been friends for a long time. Their conversation during the short walk had been very confidential. Adriana, said the man, I like talking to you so much. You are wonderful, understanding, attentive interlocutor, and a very beautiful woman. Adriana was a little embarrassed, lowered her eyes, but felt that the words of the single father were pleasant to her. I would very much like to invite you to a restaurant this Sunday. Would you mind? Michael looked at Adriana hopefully. We could have a nice meal, relax, and socialize, or suggest your own program, where you'd like to go. I'll set it up. You know, Michael, Adriana smiled. You don't have to go to a restaurant to socialize and have a good meal. Really? Where to? I'm inviting you to my place. It's my birthday on Sunday. That's wonderful. I'm happy to accept your invitation. Thank you. The man took her hand and touched it with his lips. Adriana smiled with a slight tilt of her head. And when he lowered her palm, she said, then see you later. Goodbye. I will definitely be at your place on Sunday. Adriana headed for her driveway, and Michael watched her for a few minutes. He liked this calm, a little sad, intelligent and beautiful woman very much. He thought as he got into the car and instructed his secretary to pick out the best bouquet of flowers and suggest gift options. The week was drawing to a close. In the evening, Kathy and Russia went shopping. They all couldn't decide what to get their buddy for her anniversary. It had to be special, Christina insisted, something she'd remember for the rest of her life. Why go to all that trouble, Christina? Kathy argued. The main thing is to make Adriana feel good. I don't like both. Christina exclaimed, stopping. A man should be given something he doesn't have. And you give a set, or linens, or a vase. Do you think she needs it? No, of course not. But they're all necessities. What do you think she needs? She needs a good man, that's what. Christina answered firmly. Without men, life is a bore. Kathy looked at her friend in surprise. No, of course, she had seen in various TV shows, as men are packed in a big box, and then they jump out of there, like the devil out of a snuff box, in small panties and with a bare torso. But to give Adriana a gift like that never occurred to her. Do you want to pay for a call boy stripper? Kathy asked uncertainly. Call it whatever you want. But I've decided Adriana needs a shake-up. We'll get her a man for tonight and let her figure out what to do with him. Where are we gonna get a man? Let's go. Christina pulled her friend by the hand to a bench in front of the hypermarket. Sitting down on the bench, she took out of her purse phone. Something to search in it dialed the number. Hello, we need a boy. That is, a man, for entertainment on the anniversary. How much did you feel sorry for them? Are your men made of gold? Turning off life, Christina indignantly said. Completely crazy. A man for the evening at the price of an eagle horse. Shit. What did the idea of gloating fail? Kathy, come on. There's a great department of good, quality linens here. The woman nodded in the direction of the hypermarket, but Christina was not the kind of person who would give up at the first difficulties. Pensive, she was silent, looking in front of her. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a beggar who was sitting right on the ground next to the shopping center. Do you have an idea? She exclaimed. We'll find a man for Adriana right on the street. Oh, I'm stupid. They're literally lying under our feet, and we don't see what you mean. Kathy didn't know what her friend was talking about. There's the beggar, you'll see. But that's the one we're bringing to the anniversary. And pay him what? And he'll go as sweet as a calf on a string. And they'll do anything for a penny. Are you crazy? I think it's a bad idea. Kathy said hesitantly. It's a good idea. Christina got up from the bench and with a decisive step walked towards the homeless man, stopping in front of the homeless man, in front of whom was lying an old hat with change for Mussolini. She opened her purse and handed the homeless man $1. The man nodded gratefully. Thank you. Do you sit here every day? She asked, pretending to take another bill out of her pink leather purse with rhinestones. I sit here from morning till night, the homeless man replied. Do you want a lot of money? Do you want to sell my organs? Frightened, the homeless man gathered himself, grabbed his hat, and distributed the money in the pockets of his dirty raincoat. He was about to run away from this well-dressed, strange woman, but she stopped him. Wait, what the hell do I need your organs for? What am I supposed to do? Pickle them? Trying not to scare the homeless man, the man said, Christina, I suggest you go to visit a lady. She has a holiday, a birthday, you know. The homeless man looked at the frame with empty and frightened eyes, not understanding what this beautiful woman with bright makeup on her face wanted from him. You will congratulate her and spend the evening with her. You will eat delicious food, drink wine, and I will give you this much. Christina took out of her purse 2 red $5,000 bills, $100 for one evening. What do you think of the offer? Won't the bum cheat? Still gingerly looking at Christina. That hurts. I should hurt you. You're already hurt by life. On the contrary, you will help me and I will help you. The homeless man nodded his head. That's good. That's the deal. Christina rejoiced. In short, tomorrow sit here. We, with that woman, will come to you, and then you'll get your money. She won't let you down, see? Straight in the head. The man sat down on the paving stone again and spread his hat in front of him. Christina stood next to him for a while longer, thought, and then slipped another $50 into the bum's hat. Poe stepped toward Kathy sitting on the bench. The case of the hat. Triumphant, she said. And I'm good for it, which was to prove Kathy's ideas. Colleagues seemed mad, reckless, and ridiculous, but Christina was not to be persuaded. Adventurism always fountains in her, making her go for the most reckless and crazy deeds. However, Christina always muddled out of the most difficult situations. Kathy still remembered the story, at which all the teachers in kindergarten laughed for a long time, either out of boredom, for fun, or for some other reason. She invited 5 men to her house for a date. She locked the door and threw the key out the window. When she later told how they were trying to win her attention till morning, everyone was dying with laughter. However, when the men, quite drunk, began to fight and the situation took a dangerous turn, Christina had to call the emergency services to break down the door and let the raging men out. On Sunday, Adriana decided to sleep longer, but forgot to turn off the alarm clock in her smartphone, and it persistently notified that it was already 7:30. The woman turned off the alarm clock, but she couldn't go back to sleep. She took a shower, brewed coffee, and began to think about what to prepare for the festive table to treat her friends. Adriana was also worried about what Kathy and Christina would think of her when they saw Michael. She hadn't told them that she'd invited Lisa's father from her band to visit. Scrolling through pages of websites on the internet, she wrote out a few salads and other simple appetizers on a piece of paper and decided to bake some French fries in the oven. The woman opened the refrigerator. Yesterday, she had run to the stores and bought a couple bottles of wine. A beautiful cake also flaunted on the shelf next to the fruit. All that remained was to prepare everything. She laid out the ingredients for the holiday dishes on the table, put on an apron, and started cooking. Christina and Kathy met at the site near the hypermarket. Christina, as always, was in an elevated, excited mood. She was anticipating how impressed Adriana would be with their surprise. Kathy, on the other hand, still thought Christina's idea was foolish. I understand to introduce her to a good man, decent, with a normal job. But you're looking for a bum for her. Oh, believe me, tortured men make the best husbands. At least they're as grateful as dogs picked up off the street. I'm amazed at you. You have an answer for everything. And it's hard to argue with you. Don't argue. Just do as I say. Come on. There he sits, my little dove, waiting like a sweetheart. Christina, he. I threw and went towards the homeless man, who was sitting in the same place as yesterday. The man, seeing Christina, got excited, jumped up from the paving stone, stretched out in a string. Hello, sufferer. She cheerfully greeted the homeless man. What is your name, even Alex? Said the man. He scratched his thickly stubbled chin and bent down to pick up his hat. Take the money and throw this junk in the trash. There's no need to carry unnecessary dirt from the street. The homeless man obeyed and then sank after the women. Christina brought a friend and an unfamiliar beggar to her house. Take off your shoes on the platform, or my floors are washed, she told him, and immediately threw off his clothes. Christina gave the homeless man a large bag to collect his things in it, and then led him into the hallway, examined him from head to toe. For a minute it occurred to her that the clothes on the man were expensive, high quality, but very dirty and even torn. The sweater had definitely once been snow white in some places, and the jeans had almost erased on the back. But a recognizable label from a well-known brand. How long have you been homeless? She asked. About a month, the man replied. I'm not from around here. I came to spare me the details of your nomadic life. Christina interrupted the homeless man. Anyway, here's the bathroom. There's towels, razor, soap, shampoo, everything you could possibly need. Go wash up and get cleaned up. Got it, Alex? By the way, is that a name you have or a nickname? The man answered nothing, walked through the bathroom door, and locked himself from the inside. Why did you lock yourself in? Shouted, laughing, Christina. Do you think we'll be watching you? Yeah. We haven't seen your reasons. Oh yeah. Kathy poked her buddy in the side. Why are you doing this to him? He may be homeless, but he's a human being. But Christina paid no attention to her words and went into the room. She opened the closet and thought of something to wrap a present for Adriana. But what, Kathy? We'll wrap our present in a pretty wrapper. Christina was having a lot of fun. It was a thrilling adventure for her. The woman stood on a stool and pulled a large box from the mezzanine. These are my late dad's things, she said, nodding at the neatly folded shirts, pants, and jacket. The box even held my dad's underwear. I don't know why I haven't thrown it all away. I can't bring myself to do it. The voice of Alex, the homeless guy, came from the bathroom. That robe is hanging. You can put it on. Go ahead, shouted Christina. After a few seconds in the corridor appeared a homeless man dressed in Christina, satin pink robe, barely covering his buttocks and not at all on his chest. Christina held back, unable to contain her emotions. Kathy smiled, pronouncing Glamernenka. Alex was embarrassed. He was thrashing around in the doorway of the large living room, examining himself in the mirror. The women noted that after the passage, the man looked quite decent. He looked to be no more than 40 years old, although at first Kathy thought about 50 from the smoothly shaven man. The man's coiffed, blonde hair smelled of shampoo. So come here, Christina called out to him in a commanding tone. The woman began pulling clothes out of the box. Socks, underwear, pants, shirt, and tie flew onto the couch. Let's get to the examples, she said, pulling out her father's family underpants in front of the homeless man. The man blanched. He was clearly uncomfortable. Could you turn around while I get dressed? He asked, looking at his employers with an embarrassed look. Look, Kathy, barren, embarrassed, clutched Christina again. Then added, okay, relax, we're in the kitchen if you need anything. The women left the room, leaving Alex alone with a mountain of clothes left by his late dad. When the man entered the kitchen, they darted their eyes around in amazement. The homeless man looked decent enough. The suit fit him. Vladika had no axe to grind, and the blue shirt went very well with the color of his eyes. Wow! Kathy stretched out in surprise. What did I tell you? Christina said, triumphantly pleased with herself. Washed, calmed, and calmed. What's not handsome? Would you like some tea? The homeless man didn't refuse. He sat down at the table, and I put in front of him a cup with fragrant tea and a couple of sandwiches on a plate. The man happily read the bun with sausage, drinking the tea. Finally, Christina put the cup in the sink and said, "Stop eating. We're going to visit. You can eat there." She looked at her watch and started to pack. "We still have to stop for flowers. Let's hurry up," she said to Kathy and Alex. Christina was anticipating the emotions of the upcoming evening. She drew all sorts of pictures in her imagination. But most of all, she couldn't wait to see Adriana's face when she found out that they had brought her a real street beggar as a gift. Kathy thought the idea was silly, but Christina was excited and decided to see what would happen. Standing on the doorstep of Adriana's apartment, they shoved a bouquet of roses into the homeless man's hands. Kathy pressed the bell button. There was a beautiful trill and then footsteps. "Hello," the friends shouted with glee when they saw a dressed-up colleague in a white collar dress with folded hair. "And here we are not empty-handed." The guests made their way into the hallway. Christina poked Alex painfully in the side, who, confused, hesitantly moved from foot to foot. He flinched and held out a bouquet to the birthday girl. "Happy birthday," the man said. "Thank you," thanked Adriana. She accepted the flowers and looked questioningly at her friends. "And this is Alex. Meet Alex," whispered Christina, as if nothing had happened, kicking off her shoes and heading into the living room. "This is our surprise for you," Kathy clarified. "A gentleman to host the party, so to speak. Come in, Alex," Adriana invited politely. In the center of the room stood a table covered with a tablecloth, on which plates, cutlery, and a few soldiers with appetizing snacks were arranged. Throughout the apartment spread all the pleasant odor of meat. The guests sat down at the table, and Adriana put flowers in a vase and joined them as well. "Alex, could you pour the wine?" she asked, handing the man a corkscrew. He took the bottle, stared at the label, and said, "Celebration. That's the kind of wine you need for such beautiful women." "Ha! What's wrong with this one?" "Hey, sommelier, man, it's semi-sweet, and I smell meat," Alex said with a serious look. "Meat is served red, dry. Come on, pour." He studied here intelligently. Christina pushed Alex with her elbow so that he would talk less. After drinking and snacking, sitting at the table for a while, the buddies announced that they had to go. It was part of Christina's plan. Adriana would spend the evening alone with Alex, and tomorrow at work, they would announce to her that he was a common bum. Then they'll laugh together at their buddy's reaction. She might be offended, but it was meant to be a joke. Christina was sure no one had ever gotten such an original gift. "Alex, will you help us get dressed?" she asked the man. He came out from behind the table and handed her a cloak. She slipped 2 $5,000 bills into his pants pocket, as promised. "Behave yourself, street child." With those words addressed to the bum, she left Adriana's apartment and dragged Kathy behind her. The door slammed shut. Alex stood there and didn't move. "Well, why don't you come in, since my friends ran away so quickly? Let's celebrate together," Adriana suggested. She was a little upset that Michael didn't come. She wanted to see the man again, but she thought he had more important things to do. Alex poured wine into glasses again, and Adriana brought French meat from the kitchen. "What is it?" the man asked. "French meat. Why the name?" "I don't know." The birthday girl shrugged her shoulders. Alex gladly took a knife and fork in his hands, deftly cut a piece and sent it to his mouth. "Oh, very tasty, but I would add Provence and herbs," he said. "Why?" Adriana was surprised. Since it's French meat, there must be Provence and herbs, and basil, but it's still very good. Adriana scrutinized the man she was seeing for the first time. He had a strange accent and way of speaking. "Alex, you're not from here?" she finally asked. "A little out of town," the man answered. "What do you mean?" Adriana didn't understand of it. "Born here, but lived somewhere else." "I see. Are you eating?" "Eat? Don't be shy. I confess, I can't stop eating. Alex praised the woman's culinary skills. Can I have more of this salad? Of course, Adriana moved the bowl closer to the man, and she thought that he ate a lot, like he hadn't eaten in days, and he praises the simplest salads as if he ate them for the first time. Suddenly, Alex grabbed his stomach and started to fall on his side. Oh, that's not bad for a tank. What's wrong with you? Adriana jumped up to him, supporting him by the elbow, helped him to the couch. I can't breathe. I think I've moved. Alex rolled his eyes and started rolling around on the couch. Hang on, I'll call an ambulance. Adriana ran for the phone, dialed 03, and gave her address. Soon the ambulance doctors arrived. Entering the room, they laid out an orange medicine case and examined the patient. Let's reach the shirt, the doctor said. Adriana helped Alex undo the buttons, freed his chest from the blue fabric, and suddenly froze in place. At that moment, it seemed to her that the floor was moving away from under her feet, swaying up and down. The woman staggered, took a few steps back, and plumped into a chair. Everything swam in front of her eyes, and she lost consciousness. Adriana woke up to the pungent odor of alcohol ammonia. It hit her nose so hard that the woman shook her head, trying to find a stream of fresh air. The woman with the sick. It's nothing, said the paramedic, looking into the eyes of the recovered Adriana. Why worry so much? We gave him a pill, put him on a painkiller. He'll feel better soon. It's just that the man moved. Before that, he must have been off fatty and calorie-dense foods for a long time. Adriana glanced back and forth at the doctors, then at Alex, who was lying on her couch. The shirt on his chest had been reached. The woman escorted the doctors out and slowly, as if she were haunted before her, approached her guest. The man's eyes were closed. She bent over him and carefully, so as not to disturb him, began to stretch the top buttons of his shirt. Alex jerked, grabbed her arm. What do you want? Why are you separating me? Frightenedly, he shrieked. Don't be afraid, please. Adriana tried to calm him down. Show me what you have on your neck. Not understanding anything, Alex put his hand under his collar and pulled out a wooden pendant in the form of a horseshoe on an old shoelace. Tears appeared in Adriana's eyes. They dripped slowly onto the man's shirt. Ethan, is that you? The woman whispered. She stared at her brother lying in front of her. I wanted to hug him and hold him close, but at that moment, the doorbell rang. Adriana shuddered, got up and went to open the door. At the door stood smiling Michael, holding a bouquet and a small box decorated with a bow. Hello, Adriana. Here I am, as promised to congratulate you with us. With a confident step, he entered the hallway, handed the flowers and the gift to the hostess. Where do you want to go? He asked, inviting the hair. The confused Adriana nodded her head. Michael made his way into the living room and saw a man lying on the couch with his shirt unbuttoned on his chest. He looked at Adriana in surprise. I guess this is a bad time. You could have just not opened the door. Adriana. The man looked hurt, but Adriana had already come to her senses and took his hand. On the contrary, is this a good time, Michael? She spoke quickly. Remember, you trusted me when you told me that Lisa was not your daughter. Now I want to tell you my story. You're the only one who can listen to me without emotion. Please, sit down. Michael reluctantly lowered himself onto the table next to the table set with festive dishes. Confused, sometimes confused, Adriana told him that the man had been brought to her apartment by a friend. She'd never seen him before, but on his chest hung the pendant that was supposed to be worn by her missing for years, a younger brother. She pulled out the exact same piece from Cervantes and held it out to Michael. He looked at it, then at the one on Alex's chest. Where did you get it? He asked the stranger. My foster parents gave it to me. I was wearing it when I was brought to the orphanage in this town. Apparently, it's all that's left of my real parents. Alex, look, I have the exact same one. Adriana handed him her jewelry, these two pendants. My dad made them and gave them to my mom when he confessed his love to her. The day Mom disappeared, she put the pendants on my brother and me and told us never to take them off. And then I went to an orphanage and lost my brother. I was only 5 years old at the time. If you have this pendant, you're my brother. My Ethan, Mamma Mia. Alex exclaimed and started shouting something in Italian. Michael and Adriana looked at each other in surprise, watching the man's excited behavior. And then he switched back to Russian. I knew it. I knew I would find my sister. I believed I was coming to this city for a reason. For the next 2 o'clock, all three of them sat at the table and talked. Alex told his story to Paul. The 1-year-old boy was quickly adopted by a wealthy farming couple from Italy. They loved their adopted son very much, took care of him, and even hired a woman to teach him Russian. When the boy grew up, they told him everything about his father, who had died in a fire. Alcoholic, and mothers withheld only that Alex had a native older sister. His parents were very afraid that he would look for her and leave them alone to go to Russia. Over time, Alex got an education and began to help his parents in the vineyards. And a year ago, his foster mom and dad died in a car accident. After the funeral, the man discovered a casket of papers. Going through them, he saw a piece of paper written in small handwriting. It was a letter from his adoptive mother, Louise, addressed to her son. In it, she told him that Alex had a sister, Adriana, in Russia. Ever since then, his only dream was to find her. I arrived in this city late at night, looking for a hotel, the man said. A driver picked me up on the street, but I didn't have any dollars, so he took me to a money changer. Before I could even get there, I got a blow on the head and blacked out. Then I woke up and some men were dragging me on the ground to the heating main. I didn't have any money or ID on me. It all makes sense. Michael nodded. You'd just been robbed. Yes, I was. I went to the police, but they turned me away. They told me to drink less alcohol, and the men who brought me in took pity on me, gave me food, treated the wound on my head, and then told me that I had to earn money. And they put me outside a mall with a hat. That's where your friends found me, Adriana. It's unbelievable. Adriana. Michael exclaimed. I thought it was your lover. All three of them laughed merrily. Adriana and Alex hugged each other. After 40 years, two relatives, separated by 1,000 kilometers, found each other again. We should drink to this, Michael said cheerfully and poured wine into glasses. This is the best present for my birthday, smiled Adriana, holding her brother's hand. I'm so happy for you guys. Just brings tears to my eyes, said Michael. From the beer, the wine. Alex, I'm not the last man in this town. I have connections and money. Ethan wanted to object, but Michael made a warning gesture with his hand and continued. Let me finish, please. I'll help you get your papers back in order. And then I'll help you get a job, if you want it, even in my company. I need people who speak different languages fluently. But Alex shook his head. Thank you, Michael, but I'll be going back to Italy. That's where my home is, my vineyards. It's the life's work of the people who raised me. I can't just leave everything behind. And Russia is already, admittedly, a foreign country to me. Well, you know, in any case, I've always asked for help. And just call. I'll be very happy. And you should definitely come and visit me in Italy. It's a very beautiful, hospitable country, Alex replied. Michael said goodbye to Adriana and Ethan. He hugged both of them, even kissed them on the cheeks. Totally touched by the incredible story of brother and sister. Closing the door behind him, Adriana returned to the living room, pulling out some photos from Cervantes. Hugging each other, they looked at the pictures together, taking in the faces of the people who had given them life so many years ago. And a month later, Christina, Kathy, and Michael were seen off with a ribbon on the platform of the train station. Adriana and Alex. Kathy had tears in her eyes, and Christina was saying something to keep from crying. Don't forget about us. We're the ones who helped you find each other. Low territory woman. Michael couldn't take his eyes off Adriana, as if he was saying goodbye to her. She had become a close friend lately, and he liked her a lot. Taking her hand, he said softly, "I will always look forward to seeing you." The loudspeaker announced the arrival of the train. Adriana and Alex took their suitcases and hurried to their carriage. Looking at the happy brother and sister getting on the train, they saw them off and waved their hands. "Dad, do you think we will see them again?" Lisa asked her father. "We will see them again," he replied, hugging his daughter. He had already planned to take advantage of Alex's invitation and go to Italy with the ribbon during the winter vacation.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana woke up, lost her eyes with her hand. What a horror. I fell asleep right over the last lines of the novel. She threw herself on the table beneath the light baby steps, scrambled lightly up the attics. The stairs came in. "Good morning, my joy." Adriana involuntarily admired her daughter, her smooth girlish skin of golden drama. "What morning is it?" The girl waved her hand carelessly. "It's already evening. By the way, Grandma came and was very offended that you didn't meet her." "Yes." Adriana curled her lips. "When she's going back, I'll be sure to see her off." And through the laughter. "How contradictory are you adults? You teach us to control ourselves, and you don't hold back at all. You're so smart." Adriana pressed the print button, and the pages popped into the printer tray one after another. She stood up from the table and laughed lightly. "You'd better make me a strong cup of coffee and I'll be in touch." Adriana headed towards the bathroom. "What coffee is in there?" Betty was indignant. "Do you need a solid dinner? As I recall, you haven't eaten anything since last night." Adriana turned to her daughter and smiled. "I won't say no." "Then hurry up. Come on down. I've heated everything up, golden child," Adriana thought, turning on the water and closing the door behind her. The weather in Marseille had been beautiful all month. Adriana had a new contract with a publisher, and the novel had a large print run. She rested most of her time, spending it with her daughter. Betty inherited her mother-in-law's looks and her mother's temperament, and no amount of education could curb it. In this regard, Adriana's relationship with her mother-in-law was difficult. She demanded from her some kind of extra care for her son. She imposed her way of life in the house, constantly accounted for excessive displays of affection. Adriana had long ago managed to disappear from that black English family, to go to her parents' small house in Marseille. She wanted to live not according to a schedule, but according to her mood and desire to write at night and sleep until dinner. She had managed to do that before her mother-in-law arrived. But nothing. She would soon be on her way back to England. Adriana could not wait for that moment. Soon, however, an event occurred that changed their relationship with each other. A scarlet dawn was breaking over Marseille. The sultry night was behind them. Adriana had spent it with friends, celebrating the release of her book. They left the bar, and a cab pulled up a few minutes later. Adriana said goodbye to her friends because she decided to walk a little and get some fresh air. She walked along the sidewalk and smiled. Lately, she had been lucky in almost everything, except for the arrival of her mother-in-law. Suddenly, she heard a low moaning sound off to the side. The girl turned around at it and saw a man lying on a cardboard box. People passing by paid no attention to him. Adriana walked over to him. He was unconscious. She put her hand on his wrist. His pulse was weak and sparse. The girl immediately called an ambulance. 10 minutes later, the paramedics loaded the stranger into the car. "What's wrong with him?" asked Adriana to one of the doctors. "It's hard to say," he replied. "We'll need to examine him. I need to write down your details for the report." The young woman dictated everything the doctor was interested in. When the ambulance left, she sighed heavily and went home. In the early sunny morning, Adriana was awakened by a phone call. She jumped out of bed and pressed the receiver to her ear. "Hello, hello. This is Adriana Morel." "Yes, Sorry to call you in advance, but it's necessary. This is Rick Kendall calling for you. I represent Mr. Lawman, owner of a chain of shipbuilding firms in the Crimea. Does that mean anything to you? Absolutely nothing, Adriana replied. You're currently hosting Kathy Hogarth. Yes, that's my mother-in-law. We've asked her to arrive at the harbor at 11 o'clock this afternoon. For what purpose? The solicitor took a long time to explain the details to Adriana. She listened with her eyes widening with surprise. We will arrive. She fumbled confusedly for the telephone receiver to hang up. Finally, she managed to do so. It can't be. It just can't be. Rick Kendall met them at the harbor entrance and led them to the dock. A graceful sailing vessel rocked smoothly in front of them. It was called the Kathy. A tan brunette lowered a gangplank for them. They stepped into the deckhouse. You're the Kathy. And once again, the solicitor clarified. Yes, I am. This is my daughter-in-law Adriana and granddaughter Betty. The woman pointed at them with her hand. Pleased to meet you, he grinned. May I see your passport? Just a moment. The woman took a document out of her purse and held it out to him. Kendall sat down at the table, entered the data into the contract, and handed the passport back. You didn't tell her anything. The attorney turned to Adriana. She waved her head in the negative. Well, I represent Benjamin Lawman. The woman shuddered and dropped her bag. Betty bent down and picked it up. Mr. Lawman is giving you this vessel. Please sign some papers. He led Kathy over to the table. When the formalities were over, the attorney briefly outlined the specifications of the vessel, handed the woman a white gift envelope, and stepped ashore. Kathy quickly slipped the envelope into her breast pocket and smiled awkwardly. Where is the master himself? He doesn't want to see me, she shouted after Kathy. Unfortunately, Mr. Lawman is ill and undergoing treatment. It's only by luck that he's alive. So have a safe trip. The man said goodbye. So what's next? Kathy asked. What about what? I was surprised. Let's go upstairs and look at the present. On the deck, a handsome young man approached them. My name is Ethan Jenkins. He introduced himself. Mr. Lawman asked me to take you for a ride along the coast of Marseilles. So me and 2 sailors are at your complete disposal. Or do you prefer the open sea? Of course, in the open, Ariza clapped her hands and turned to her grandmother. Do you mind? Oh, really? Tears glistened in Kathy's eyes. Well, the provisions have been delivered to the ship. There's seating aft, 3 comfortable cabins below. Let's go. Adriana nodded to the boy with a smile. He looked at her admiringly and went downstairs. Betty followed him. The 2 women were left alone. Adriana looked at Kathy questioningly. I'd like to explain everything to you, but I can't find the words, she said. I don't think that's necessary. Adriana laughed. She took her novel out of her large sports bag and handed it to her mother-in-law. Soon the yacht was out on the open sea. The engine smogged. The sailors pulled up the sails, and Betty brought Adriana a warm plaid. She spread it out on the deck. She sat with her arms around her knees and listened with pleasure to the music of the waves. There was quite a bit of Ethan in the deckhouse. You promised you'd let me stand at the helm. Well, give it a try. Ethan stepped aside. Betty put her hands on the helm. Wow, that's great. You speak Russian really well. It's the steering of the boat that needs some practice. Ethan put his hands on top of the helm. So my grandmother's been speaking Russian to me since I was a kid. So it's no problem. I also speak French and English easily. You don't suffer from modesty, do you? Ethan grinned, a 15-year-old captain, and through the shouting she was only 13. Strange story, though. She cocked her head, trying to convince Ethan. Just some mysterious Mr. X, this Mr. Lawman. Where did he come from, and what's his connection to my grandmother? I've known Benjamin for a while, and not much else. He and my father were friends once, and then they didn't speak for a long time. He helped us a lot. We had some hard times in our family. Thanks to him, I got interested in backed-in sports too. Now I often go to his house. He's a very hospitable host, but he's secretive and stingy with his emotions. Your grandmother was in the same class as my father. Wow. And through the release of his hand sought a chair behind Ethan's back. Look, there was a love story there. I can feel it. I'm gonna go take a look at my ladies. Maybe something once. By the way, ask them. We'll spend the night at sea. It's humbling if we do. There are groceries on campus. I'd like something to eat. Yeah, I'll ask. Betty hurried to the deck. It was empty. The girl went downstairs to the cabins. The door of one of them was open. Betty heard muffled voices. How did you know all this? Asked Kathy. It's just a fantasy, she replied. Yes, but you told me a little bit about your past. You named them. But you didn't know the essence. Call it subtle intuition if you want. It's incredible. You captured my feelings very accurately. I'm a woman, and I can love too, even if you doubt it. Forgive me, I've been too selfish, too withdrawn, too trusting. And today I not only took a little sea voyage, but thanks to one of your stories, I plunged into the abyss of the past. You know, I want this boat to be yours. Yours and Betty's. It's worth over $3 million in rubles. You made me happy today, and I want to repay you and make you a millionaire. Let me make it up to you. There was a quiet, sobbing sound. Apple took a step back, and her foot caught on the plate left on the floor. She picked it up. Inside was an open book with a note lying in it. Kathy walked out of the cabin, slamming the book. Betty managed to read from the sheet. Forgive me, Benjamin. She held out her grandmother's novel. On the cover was a picture of a sailing ship against a seascape, and printed in brightly colored lettering, the title is Stronger Than All Victories. Farewell. Benjamin Lawman and Michael Jenkins had been friends since childhood. Benjamin no longer remembered how they met. In one of the time-blurred early memories of their strongest summers together, swinging on a wooden swing in the shade of tall poplars. But was it reality or a play of the imagination? Benjamin could not say with certainty. They went to the same kindergarten, studied in the same class, lived in the same stairwell. Benjamin's mother was a good fish cook on Thursdays too. Both families had dinner at White's without fail. In turn, Michael's mother would invite the neighbors over for her famous 12-layer honey cake, and everything on Sunday was filled with the smells of honey and strong over emergency Indian tea. Lawman and Jenkins, I'm telling you again, if you don't stop whispering immediately, I will tell you. I urge you to concentrate. Final exams are coming up. Christina, the physics teacher, adjusted her glasses from the floor of her neck to the tip of her nose and continued to explain the new topic. The door opened into the classroom, and slowly the breasts and then the size of the body of the headmaster surfaced. Excuse us a moment, Christina. She walked to the back of the room. You have a new addition to your regiment. Meet Kathy. She turned to the students and pointed to a tall, white-skinned girl who entered with her hair carelessly golden at the back of her head. Please love and pity her. She will be studying with you from today. The new girl said hello, looked around at her classmates carefully, and walked to a vacant back desk. Very nice. Michael winked at his friend. Benjamin shrugged indifferently. It was 1991. A May thunderstorm was blowing outside the window. Benjamin had brought back another medal from the swimming competition, right on the eve of his majority. The Lawman family was getting ready to celebrate. A statuesque blonde woman was setting the table in the kitchen. A handsome man with a somewhat sly expression watched the goose cooking. He carefully opened the cupboard door, once again filled his glass with Wermacht, and sat down at the kitchen table, happily holding out the amber drink. Benjamin emerged from his bedroom, strode into the hall. Christina stopped arranging the dishes on the table and looked thoughtfully at her son. Her memory took her back to the summer of 1980. Benjamin had fallen gravely ill then. The disease gave complications, so the boy went to first grade only the next year at the age of 8. Christina slowly sat down on a stool. Tears came to her eyes. Benjamin, have you grown up? Finished school and in the army. Quietly washed up. She knew the sobs and the sobs. "Mom, stop being so damp." Benjamin hugged his mother and gently wiped her wet cheeks. The bell rang. Christina immediately lit up, stood in the front doorway, and Michael's glowing face appeared. He walked in and appraisingly looked at his friend. "Well, you've made your point." He commented on Benjamin's strict new suit. Benjamin put his index finger to his lips. "Now the parents will be gone. I've changed the present," he explained. "I don't want to offend." Michael nodded understandingly. "How is the goose?" Christina shouted in the direction of the kitchen. When William heard his wife's voice, he rummaged around the kitchen with an unacceptable glass in his hand. Finally, he set it down behind a flower pot on the windowsill and walked into the hall. Christina looked up at him. "Yes," she stretched out. "The goose is ready." William lowered his eyes and shivered, letting his wife into the kitchen. She opened the oven, pulled out a baking tray. The goose was covered with a pink-brown crust. The sweet smell of meat and spices filled the room, and this one was ready. She turned off the stove, then took an unopened bottle of Vermouth from the cupboard and silently handed it to her husband. "But that's it, guys." She turned to Benjamin and Michael. "Make your own mashed potatoes. You guys gonna split up? Knock us out." She opened the door and went out onto the landing. Christina called her William. What did she turn around for? She forgot to take off her apron. Christina laughed, took off her apron, and threw it over her husband's head in the direction of the smirk. "All the boys," and caught it on the fly. Christina knocked on the neighbor's door. Michael's mother appeared on the doorstep. A searing Cossack. "Come in, neighbors." She smiled broadly, handing Michael a tray with her signature cake. Benjamin bowed theatrically. "Thank you very much for such an appetizing birthday present. May it be yours." I got embarrassed and closed the front door. The guys returned to the apartment. Michael went into the hall and put the cake on the coffee table by the window. Benjamin was in the kitchen draining the water off the potatoes. "Go potatoes," he called out to his friend. "I'll go and change my clothes." At the whistle of the tray rhythmically melody, Michael smoothly opened the refrigerator, took out milk butter, and plunged into the process of cooking mashed potatoes. When the dish was ready, he tangled the pot tightly in a terry towel, grinned contentedly, and headed for his friend's room. Benjamin had already changed into a dark green Empire, tight blue jeans, and was radiantly removing 2 liter bottles of vague liquid from under the couch. Michael gasped with joy. "And I thought I'd have to settle for a crown. How did Granny manage to show solidarity?" Benjamin held out the bottle to Michael. "Yes, she's a worldly old lady." Michael winked at his friend, went into the hall, and put the bottles on the table. The bell rang insistently. Benjamin went to the front door and opened it. From the threshold, the guests gave a friendly shout. "Happy birthday. Happy birthday." "Thank you." Benjamin playfully bent to roll the whole thing. The noisy crowd could barely fit in the narrow hallway. Michael immediately rushed over to the tall, slender brunette Clara. He helped her take off her windbreaker. He hung it on the rack and sat down carefully, taking off her shoes. From the flawless feet of a classmate, tipped it lightly over her head. Slaga laughed contentedly. Michael became. She grabbed his waist with her hands and lightly touched her lips to his cheek, the young man. Then, closing the embrace, confidently took Michael under her arm, and they walked to the table. Benjamin accepted the clothes of his companions, Sam, Jack, and Sophia, and looking at the filled hanger, he went to the bedroom, folded the jackets on the sofa, and returned to the guests. They were rattling their plates in friendship, pouring themselves cold appetizers. Michael was serving alcohol. When the doorbell rang again, Benjamin suddenly shuddered. "Oh, it must be my brother," said Clara with feline grace, putting her foot on his leg. Yeah, uninvited. And definitely with some new girl." She cast a sly glance at Benjamin. He was in no hurry to open the door. Michael patted me on the shoulder to open it. Benjamin waved his head negatively and headed for the front door himself. It was indeed Sluod's brother, and he didn't come alone. Alex was holding the hand of a new girl from their class. "Happy birthday, Benjamin." He said, "Happy birthday. You don't mind my company?" The boy nodded at Kathy, and she looked a little embarrassed. "No." Benjamin smiled confusedly. "Come in." Alex quickly took off his denim jacket, threw it on the podium, and rubbing his hands, made his way into the hall. The crowd gave a friendly buzz. Greeting him, Benjamin and Kathy were left alone. "You can undress in my room." He guiltily nodded toward the coat rack and strode toward the bedroom. Kathy followed. The room was in semi-darkness. Benjamin held out his hands to help the girl remove her cloak. Kathy stopped him and took a small box out of her pocket. A present. She smiled as she opened it. It was a miniature model of a sailing ship. "Congratulations. I hear you want to join the Navy." Here she held out the model 7 feet under the keel, both at sea and in life. "Thank you." Benjamin smiled, looking at the gift. Kathy took off her cloak and laid it on the back of the couch. She liked it. Did she glance at the birthday boy? Very much. Benjamin set the model on the bookshelf and held out his hand to Kathy. "Let's go to the guests." "Let's go." 12 pairs of eyes in the crosshairs. Hand in hand. They appeared in the doorway for a moment. There was silence in the room. Alex flew over to Kathy and pulled her to the table, seating herself next to him. "This is Kathy." He introduced her to the company. "You all know her, though." Benjamin sat down next to Michael and Clara, across from Kathy and Alex. "So," Michael rose from his seat. "Finally, everyone's here. So let's have a toast to my best friend's coming of age." He turned to face Benjamin. "Happy birthday. Happy birthday." The guests cheered. "Happy birthday." In the midst of the fun, Clara danced with Michael over his shoulder, watching Kathy. She didn't like her new acquaintance. Imperfect, sure, but there was something about her. She pondered. The boys are bursting at her. Soon they'll break their eyes. Beautiful thick hair, the color of ripe wheat, slightly frizzy. Clean, not with falling below the shoulders. She's not badly built, but she's clumsy. I'm much more graceful. The dress isn't bad. Straight 1 ton. The khaki color sets off the color of her eyes, the cleavage of her breasts. She's got taste, she's got legs, and they're slim. But my longer and much prettier eyes cannot make out whether gray or gray-green mint or prominent form. Here she is completely resting. Mine are just huge lakes. You could drown, yeah. At the look, what's her look? Caressing. Exciting standing sensuality. Skin, pale as milk. Lips, varied beautiful, medium correct shape. Straight nose. Sharp chin with dimples. Still, she was very attractive. Clara shook her lips. My queen frowned. Michael kissed her ear and whispered, You are the most beautiful. I am far away from you." He nodded towards Kathy. Clara shuddered. She ran her thin fingers through Michael's thick hair and looked into his mesmerizing black eyes. "And you know all about me." She ran her hands up his neck and kissed his lips appreciatively. Alex was looking at Kathy too. Sweet, appetizing, young girl, but too right. Wasted his time with her. He got nervous and went out to the balcony for a smoke. Benjamin, on the other hand, could not help but admire the new acquaintance of her from her burning eyes. An open smile, an infectious laugh. Literally, everything about her seemed warm and native to him. He stood up and asked Kathy to dance. But the tune suddenly ended. Michael quickly jumped to the tape recorder, flipped the cassette, and the music spilled into the room languidly, drowning out the human voices. Benjamin put his arms around Kathy. Her nearness made him feel infinitely happy. She pushed back the hair that was falling over her face. Benjamin said a little audibly, "Your hair smells like a spring plow." Really, she looked embarrassed. "You don't like it?" "No." He gently touched her lush locks with his hand and liked it very much. Kathy laughed softly, and Joy felt her relax in his arms. The balcony door slammed. Alex entered the room. He froze, and his gaze slid absent-mindedly across the parquet. Then Alex quickly walked past the dancers and sat down at the table. Throughout the evening, he never looked at Kathy again. Clara swayed to the beat of the music, rolling a delicious pink apple in the palm of her hand. She looked at Benjamin and Kathy and smiled contentedly. The feeling between them pleased her. Sure, Benjamin was a good-looking guy, but a little plain, short, strongly built with a charming smile and clear brown eyes. He attracted the attention of the opposite sex. But Michael was truly handsome. She looked in his direction. Tall, slender with perfect facial features. He felt every movement of my soul. There's a smile playing on my favorite face. He gets up from the chair, comes over, touches my neck, gently runs his fingers through my hair. There is no peace next to Michael. Girls are crazy about him, and so am I. I'm in love with his searing black eyes and hair the color of a crow's wing. His humor, his plasticity. I'd tear anyone apart if she wants to take him away from me. On impulse, she wrapped her arms around Michael, pressed herself tightly against him. A small shiver shook her body. Abruptly, she pulled away. She took a big bite of the apple. Droplets of juice appeared on their lips. She looked up at Michael, and in her emerald eyes danced lights, fierce, all-consuming passion. The music ended. Benjamin and Kathy stood in the middle of the room, unable to look away from each other. Then they sat down at the table, and without paying attention to others, enjoyed each other's company for the rest of the evening. By midnight, the guests began to leave. Alex, who had been drinking a lot, came to Kathy and took her hand. "After all, I decided to see you off, baby." He staggered a little. He asked, looking into her eyes. Kathy gently withdrew his hand and waved her head negatively. "No, I'm with Benjamin." Went retired. Michael held out his jacket to him. Alex slung it over his shoulder and followed the others out onto the landing. Benjamin helped Kathy put on the coat, and they went downstairs. It smelled of rain and spring freshness outside. Kathy took Benjamin under her arm. "Where do you live?" he asked. "On Lennon." "If we turn into that prologue," Kathy stretched out his arm, "in 10 minutes we will be at my house. Is there an authentic way?" Benjamin winked at the girl. "Normal heroes always take a detour." "There is." Kathy laughed. "There is always another way." Benjamin set his face to the flow of the light Sebastopol flight. He looked at the exciting turquoise eye of the Black Sea, sat down on the sandy shore, took the letter from Kathy out of his trouser pocket and reread it again. The dove of a warring train came to mind, the smell of spring grasses from the developing golden hair, the girl he loved, the clatter of the wheels, and the soulful July night were pervaded with anger. A little over a year has passed since that moment. Benjamin was in the Navy. Kathy and Michael were studying law at the Finnish State University. Both were sure to keep him at least briefly informed about each other's lives. Kathy wrote about successfully passing the first session. She was in the same group as Michael. Benjamin looked at the skyline. His imagination pictured tired and hungry students walking out of the doors of a familiar university. Outside, they are exchanging impressions, joys, and failures. All the girls look back in the direction of the handsome black-haired guy next to whom Kathy is walking. She is in her open gray dress. Her shoulders have managed to absorb a light Finnish tan. With a graceful movement of her head, she tries to push back her hair. Benjamin sank deeper and deeper into his sweet reverie. He remembered their first kiss, the gentle embrace, and the feeling of warmth under the fabric of that gray dress. There were still 2 whole years ahead of them, and they seemed like an eternity. 6 months of boot camp dancing behind them, a Navy mop made from the plastline of your new end, constant hunger, trips to harvest grapes. Now, more and more often, the cruiser on which Benjamin served went out on patrol in the Kerch Strait area, and free time was almost no. But he did not leave his hobby. Studied literature, dishes, construction, collected magazine articles on repair and construction of small ships. Often considering Kathy's gift, He clearly visualized the vessel in its actual proportions, taking shelter under the shade of the trees. Clara watched Michael and Kathy. Holding hands, they crossed the road. "Bastard. What a bastard," whispered Clara. "I hate you so much. Michael had the misfortune to be in the same class with you. He's looking after a friend's girlfriend." "What? I'm not giving him to you. He's mine." She abruptly left her seat and headed for the post office. Benjamin was very surprised when he received a letter from Clara. He started to read it, and the text swam before his eyes. With trembling hands, Benjamin tore the hated theater sheet into small pieces and threw them on the barracks floor. All night he spent without sleep, and in the morning he went to sea. On the cruiser, sailors were vigorously discussing the agreement between Russia and Ukraine on the division of the Black Sea Fleet. "Stop talking. Line up," commanded the petty officer. He looked at Benjamin with surprise. "You look exhausted. They got Jack Lawman, haven't they?" He gave a strained smile, but he couldn't stand it any longer, waved his hand and swore. "It's not a service, it's chaos. It's just the nucleus, mother. The fleet is divided." Benjamin suddenly realized with horror that the fate of the Black Sea Fleet is finally decided, and the city became even colder. The heart lived with pain and emptiness. There was a noise of engines. The cruiser was gaining momentum. The streets of Enrico View were alive. Michael walked into the entryway of a 5-story building. As he walked, he brushed snow off his coat. He ran up to the 4th floor and rang Kathy's apartment bell. She opened the door. "Urka." Michael impulsively hugged her. "I invited Benjamin to the wedding." "Yeah. And what did he say?" There was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "He hasn't written to me at all." "Nothing." Michael rubbed his frozen hands together. "I'm just waiting. He's got to react to his best friend's dark ties." "That would be nice." Kathy smiled weakly. "Christina says he hardly writes at all, which isn't like him." "When is your wedding?" "Clara's in a hurry. We filed the application today, so in exactly 1 month, I'm breaking up my single life." "Do you think Benjamin will be able to make it?" "I don't know, honestly, Michael. I don't know. He hasn't said anything for so long. Probably fell out of love with me and met someone else." "What are you talking about?" "Kathy. Nonsense. You see the mess going on over there. I called the unit. They didn't even call them. They said he's not supposed to. He'll write. He'll write." Michael and Clara got married. A year later, they had a son. Kathy took care of her sick father for a long time. But despite her best efforts, he passed away quietly in his bed in the early spring morning. Kathy was left alone with her mother. She waited expectantly. But Benjamin never wrote. Kathy was walking home when a May thunderstorm came noisily into town. She froze in the rain, wiping her tear-wet eyes. Someone covered the girl with their umbrella right up to her. It was Benjamin's mother. "Thank you, Christina, sweetheart." Kathy turned her weeping face toward her. "You're not telling me anything, but Benjamin's about to arrive, isn't he? Oh, what kind of punishment is this?" The woman's face grew sad. "He's not coming. He's going to St. Petersburg. He's going to enter the Military Technical University. So I told you everything. Even though I promised I wouldn't say anything." Christina put an umbrella in the girl's hand and slowly walked away until the raindrops stopped beating against its fabric. Kathy stood in one place. All day, Benjamin was not left with an uneasy feeling of foreboding. He was returning home from class. The cold October wind was driving yellow leaves across the pavement. He appeared and shuddered near the entrance where he rented an apartment. He saw a familiar figure. No, he hadn't. It was her, Kathy. He swiftly approached her, heart from nodding frantically dove. He stopped and looked up at her. She was wearing a light green mush world coat. The wind ruffled her golden hair. "I'm here to see you, Benjamin." Her fingers sawed, clasping the strap of a lady's purse. Benjamin almost didn't hear her, blood pounding annoyingly in her temples. "What was between you and Michael?" he asked bluntly, and his heart grew cold waiting for an answer. What makes you think you can answer the question, Kathy? Michael married Sarah. They have a son growing up. Benjamin is a little confused, but that doesn't mean anything. I don't believe you, Benjamin, Kathy, souls or tears. That's why you haven't written to me. What's the matter with you, Benjamin? You know I love you. I don't know. I don't know anything. He covered his face with his hands. Go away. You're hurting me. Kathy awkwardly adjusted the silk handkerchief around her neck, lowered her head, and walked away. Benjamin stared after her for a long time before she disappeared around the next corner. 5 years had passed since Kathy and Benjamin had parted. After the institute, Benjamin returned to Ukraine and got a job at a shipyard. In the city, he sometimes worked part-time repairing boats. He was fond of Yacht King. He rented a room in a house near the sea, installed an opal in the backyard, and started building his yacht. He was fortunate enough to meet another enthusiast, and the two of them spent 2 years working evenings after work on weekends and vacations to complete their project. The yacht turned out to be successful, with good, seaworthiness. It had small dimensions and simple construction of a spacious foredeck, and the sails were made of lap sleds. The friends registered their vessel and joined a yacht club. They often won not only in their class, but also left larger yachts behind on many occasions. Regular orders from private individuals allowed Benjamin to accumulate a decent capital, leave the factory, and open a small private firm for the construction, repair, and design of small boats. His business expanded over the years. Subsidiary firms were opened all along the Black Sea coast of Crimea. Benjamin worked on the Gap with a kind of fierceness, solving organizational and management issues. He did not stop designing. He slept 2-3 o'clock hours a day and was never tired. His subordinates could not keep up with his frenetic rhythm of life. They couldn't find a single weakness in the chief. They called him Werther the Robot, an inquisitive, desperately in love boy in worn jeans, and the Watson of the Empire, dissolved in a haze of memories and turned into Mr. White. And nothing could disturb his soul, the soul of a brutally principled entrepreneur, obsessed with the only passion for his business. And only in the cold October evenings, when the wind drove the fallen leaves through the streets, he became irritated at any trifle and committed uncharacteristic acts. And now he felt a future longing, watching the hateful wind play in the yellowed leaves of the trees and listening to its crazy song. He abandoned his car in the yard, walked swiftly into the mansion, and slammed the front door loudly. In the house stood the sound of the impenetrable window, and the wind could not be heard, but in the heart of the man leaning helplessly against the front door, louder and louder conquered the extended October wind. "Why so loud, dear?" A glamorous, long-legged blonde appeared in the hallway. She languidly led the way past him, showing off all the charms of her figure. Benjamin looked at her indifferently and finally stepped away from the door, took off his coat, and handed it to the girl. "Take it to the check room." The girl froze for a moment. "My joy is not in good spirits. I've been promoted to the rank of servant." Benjamin answered nothing. He went up to his study, wrapped up the paintings, and came back to lie down on the leather sofa. In her bedroom, the blonde walked over to the cotton nightstand and sink her martini glass and collapsed on the bed with a crash. "Newsy Poosy, what are we not to a tea?" mumbled she, pulling her cell phone out from under the pink cool pillow. "Hi," she said, shifting to a whisper. "You know, my secretive one went to bed alone again. I'm bored." "No, he has a fall exacerbation of what?" "What mental aggravation?" "I tolerate it, because he promised me a new car. But I'm bored to tears. He doesn't like it when I have fun." "Auntie." The girl twiddled her thumbs. "All right, I'll give it a shot. Meet me at the club. At the moment, I guess. He doesn't give a rat's ass about me." All night, Benjamin was haunted by the same dream. He was running away from the cold wind on a deserted road. A tornado of fall leaves followed him, and he fell into the bile-smelling grass and gasped for breath. He awoke at 5 o'clock in the morning, wiping sparring from his forehead. Then the fears and remnants of the dream made their way to the bathroom, undressed, and stood under the shower. The rushing stream of hot water from above finally freed him from the nightmare. Later, wrapped in a towel, he went down to the kitchen and drank 2 cups of scalding black coffee. Outside the window, a warm, sunny day was dawning. Jumping over a step, Benjamin went up to the 2nd floor and opened the door to the blonde's bedroom. The room had a rainy smell of liquor and expensive perfume. He entered and opened the window. The blonde stirred and opened her eyes with difficulty. "What the master desires," he barely audibly mumbled. "I'm leaving." Benjamin sat down next to the girl on the bed. "Take the money from my desk. Behave yourself." He stroked her tangled hair. "I see." The guy frowned. "It will be done." Benjamin stood up and headed for the exit. "You don't love me at all." He followed. He closed the door silently behind him. Benjamin stared, watching everything around him shrink. The fields of the forest. Everything was taking on a model shape. He leaned back in his chair, remembering his last visit to Minsk. Then he still wanted to know about the fate of his friend and former lover. That was when he had met Clara by chance. She, carefully avoiding his gaze, told about her family life son, quite successful career Michael. He had graduated from the bar, and his services were popular in the city. In passing, she mentioned Kathy, and in that instant Benjamin's heart rumbled. She worked for a major travel firm, representing its interests near Remington Resort. Met Justin Foreman, a successful lawyer. Married him, had a son and lives in England. The plane began to descend. This time, Pinsk welcomed Benjamin with warm weather. He drove up to the house of his youth and immediately looked into the outermost windows of the 3rd floor. He quickly climbed the stairs and hesitantly pressed the bell button. The front door bolted open and Christina appeared on the threshold. Her lips quivered. "Benjamin." She stepped toward him and pressed herself against her son's chest. "Mommy's going to be a flood." Benjamin put his arm around her shoulders and kissed her gray temple. "Volodya, why are you lying down? Meet your son." She took Benjamin's hand and pulled him into the apartment. With a radiant face, William appeared in the hallway. He hugged his son. "What brings you to our neighborhood?" "Passing through," he asked. Benjamin waved his head in the negative. "No, I just missed you. Why didn't you say so?" With trembling hands, Christina offered her hair. "I would have cooked something delicious." "Well, make it now." William cast an angry look at his wife. "And you, son, will you rest from the road?" He approached Christina, and they retired to the kitchen. Benjamin took off his coat and shoes and went into his room. Nothing had changed there. As before, on the bookshelf stood his favorite books. An old plush blanket lay on the sofa. Benjamin lay down and instantly fell asleep. He dreamed of the dark, raging waters of the Black Sea. A strong wind tore the sails of his yacht. An oncoming ship emerged from the fog. A woman stood at the stern. She held out her arms to him. A gray, damp haze enveloped her silhouette, and it dissolved into space. Still in the power of sleep, Benjamin opened his eyes and pulled the smell of roasting meat from his nose, bringing him back to reality. In the kitchen glowed Christina. On the table stood a plate of appetizingly beer-battered. What a regal breakfast awaited me. Benjamin stretched sweetly. "Lunch." Christina changed to a whisper and "Hurry up, because my father has been eyeing the cognac since yesterday." She nodded towards the final. "Well, that's fixable." Benjamin went through the baths. Half an hour later, the whole family gathered around the table. Withdrawn after 3 knocked-back shots, William asked his son, "I hope you're joining us for a long time." 3 days at your complete disposal," answered Benjamin. "We've been working on the clogs." It was delicious. A big smile spread across Christina's face. "What are your plans for today?" "What plans?" "There is a proposal in advance to agree to everything." Benjamin spent the whole day near his parents. They drove to the cemetery in quiet sadness, stood by a dear grave, went into the little chapel next door in meridian of church candles. Benjamin remembered his grandmother. Her affectionate gaze and pie-smelling lines wrinkled. Then they wandered around the evening city for a long time, had dinner in a small cafe, and returned home. Benjamin was paying off the cab driver when a cell phone appeared in his coat pocket. He beckoned to his parents to come up and started the conversation. The manager of the yacht club was calling, with details of the past regatta. Benjamin listened to the occasionally over-lively emotional subordinate, while his thoughts swirled to one thing. Everything. Then Alex, everything, then he said, and passed out. The bright light of car headlights for a moment blinded him. Near the entrance, a cab slowed down, from which a tall black-haired man got out. He walked quickly past Benjamin, but suddenly stopped and turned to face him. "Hello, Benjamin." "Hello, Michael," replied Benjamin, clutching the cell phone in the palm of his hand. "Are you visiting?" asked Michael. "Yes," Benjamin said. "Not for a while." "I see." Michael hesitated and, looking at the toes of his shoes, said quickly, "Kathy is here visiting her mother and her son." "I don't care about that." Michael grinned. "Yes. You haven't cared about us for a long time." He waved his hand and walked quickly up the stairs. He couldn't move. Benjamin stood in one place for a long time, but the footsteps of his former friend echoed in his head. He shook off the obsession and entered the entrance. Christina immediately noticed the change in her son's mood. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing." And Benjamin smiled strained. He undressed, went into the hall, and sat down in a chair. William looked away from the TV screen and looked at his son carefully. "What's sour?" he began. William scratched the back of his head thoughtfully. "Organize us a shot and a couple of sandwiches." He cleared the coffee table of newspapers. Christina brought a bottle of vodka, 2 shots, a plate of sandwiches, and quietly left. Benjamin drank with pleasure, and through the fog of his thoughts maintained a conversation with his father. He, in his turn, was not overly curious and told about his mutual acquaintances and fishing trips. Benjamin relaxed and felt the strain of tonight forced upon him. He laughed at his father's jokes, shared his impressions of the changes in Minsk, and almost completely forgot about his meeting with Michael. In her room, Christina lifted her head from the pillow, listened to Benjamin's voice, and smiled happily. She liked to fall asleep feeling her son's presence beside her. In the middle of the night, Benjamin woke up with a heavy heart. An inexplicable excitement swept over him. He got up, dressed, and went outside. Benjamin almost ran down the familiar streets, the cold wind whipping him in the face. Dawn ran behind the three, gazing up into the sky, ravaged frontiersman. He stopped, lowered his head, and stared, sightless, at the door of a familiar entryway. She was creating. His heart beat frantically against his ribs. Kathy stepped out of the entryway. Joy struggled to suppress the urge to run toward her. They stared at each other for a long time. Kathy's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head negatively, turned around, and disappeared into the entryway. Benjamin looked on confused, slammed the door shut, then slowly made his way back the way he had come. His mind drowned in an abyss of despair. It turned out that his endless struggle with his love was even. He was completely unaware of his actions. What was this strange feeling? Had torn him from his warm bed and forced him to come here this early, straight, angry morning. After all, he'd been chasing away the ghost of his first love for years. He'd been diligent in smothering it, his release from the pain. Over the years, the pain had gone, but the love had still lodged in his heart with a sharp rubber band that sometimes nudged, and his soul walked with loneliness. He walked and swore himself for the past, Kathy for the present. But why? Why had she left? He was ready to forgive her everything, all his suffering. Just to hold her, to feel her breath, to smell her hair, to touch her cheek with his lips. Gasping, Kathy ran into the apartment and immediately rushed to the window. She looked at the departing Benjamin and averagely slid along the wall. He was leaving, and now for good. How painful was it to let him go? It felt like her soul was bursting at the seams. But why had he come? Can time be turned back? I can't be with him anymore. I can't. But then why was he so obsessed with his jealousy? So sure he was right. Why didn't he look into it and just go along with his feelings? How much does it hurt? God, it hurts so much to let go of someone you love. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Alan, Kathy's 12-year-old son, walked into the room. She held out her arms to him. Come here, my darling. Holland came over and cradled her head against his chest. Kathy kissed his warm hands and cried softly. Holland stroked her head. Mommy, let's go home. You're always sick here. I'm scared. You're right. Kathy stood up, wiped her wet face, and put her arm around her son's shoulders. Let's go back. An hour later, Kathy looked up at the street. Her mother waved her hand through the carriage windows behind the rain drum. Kathy peered into the compartment. Ellen was sleeping peacefully. She walked quickly into the empty vestibule and let the tears flow. The train was rapidly gaining momentum. At the same time, looking at his native Pinsk disappearing under the wing of the airplane, Benjamin took out a model of a sailing ship from the inner pocket of his coat and looked at it for a long time. The stewardess brought the cognac he had ordered. Benjamin thanked her and held out the souvenir in the palm of his hand. Take this for you. With one lip, he said. The girl smiled and accepted the gift, and the city returned to the porthole. The rain intensified. He drank the cognac and dialed the girl's number. She picked up. Benjamin, are you crazy? Why don't you answer the phone? I've been getting calls from your employees. When will you be here? I'm already on a plane. I'm sorry, but it's better if you pack your things and leave. That girl's voice turned into a scream. What kind of asshole are you? You found a toy. Come and go. Damn you. I'm sorry, but go away. Benjamin hung up. It was also raining in Sevastopol, and Benjamin entered the empty house. It was in unimaginable chaos. The curtains had been torn from the windows. Things scattered underfoot, shards of broken crockery crunching. He went up to his office, took the car keys, and went down to the garage. Benjamin arrived in Nikolaev in the late afternoon, summoned the farm manager and workers. He drove in, opened the car door, and immediately gave the order. Put Kathy on the water. Benjamin, the manager, was confused with his eyes. She hadn't been tested yet, and there was a storm warning. Get down. Benjamin got out of the car. The boat was lowered. As Benjamin stepped out into the open sea, darkness shrouded the boat on all sides. The rain was pouring down on the deck. The wind tore the sails. Suddenly, by midnight, the sea calmed. The fog cleared and revealed a starry sky. Benjamin stretched out on the wet deck, spread his arms, and closed his eyes. He listened to the silence of the night and dreamed, for things could have been different. Like this. In the middle of the night, Benjamin awoke with a heavy heart. An inexplicable excitement swept over him. He got up, got dressed, and went outside. Benjamin almost ran through the familiar streets. The cold wind sheeted his face. Dawn came running in. Staring up into the sky, insights played out. He himself stopped, lowered his head, and stared, sightless, at the door of a familiar entryway. She was creating. His heart beat frantically against his ribs. He took a step forward. Kathy stepped out of the entryway. She moved toward him. The distance between them was rapidly shrinking. Benjamin hugged her nostrils behind her cheek. It came the scent of meadow grasses, pressed her hands to his chest, and nestled against her lips. The years dissolved. The distance dissolved. Everything that separated them dissolved. Then Benjamin woke up in the inn. The sun was already at its zenith. He raised himself on the bed. His heart beat alarmingly. Kathy wasn't around. He heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom, laughed, and buried his face in the pillow, storing the scent of the woman he loved. He closed his eyes. Their closeness was overwhelming. Passion, tenderness, sadness. Everything mixed and exploded in a sensual cocktail of love. How good, easy and joyful, squeezing the stone shell in his chest, cracked there inside something throbbing in his ear. The rubble crumbles to dust. Now it's full force. It's a hot human heart. My heart. A heart saved by love. Wrapped in a towel, Kathy stepped out of the shower. Benjamin melted and walked over to her, unwrapped the towel, pressed his whole body against her, and whispered, "I invite this departing goddess to repeat the water procedures with me as a mere mortal." "I agree." Kathy played along. Benjamin scooped her into his arms. She took his neck with her hands. They looked into each other's eyes and felt happy, tired and very hungry. They went outside in the late afternoon. On their way, they came across a small cafe located in a semi-basement. It was quiet and cozy inside. They sat down at a table in the corner and placed their order. The waiter brought cognac, wine, and salads. Benjamin filled glasses. Kathy bought some of her own and took the salad with gusto. Benjamin looked at her and smiled slightly. Hungry Kathy raised her head as if she hadn't eaten anything for a week. "Eat, eat." Benjamin moved his plate toward him. "You need to regain your strength. You're going to need it." Kathy put aside her fork and said without raising her eyes, "I need to get home. My mom's probably already put out a BOLO." Benjamin furrowed his brow and nodded. "Yes, I understand." He reached across the table and squeezed her cold fingers tightly. "I don't want to part with you. Are you going to Minsk for a long time?" Kathy changed the subject of conversation. "Everything depends on you. I certainly deserve a long vacation." "Oh," Kathy's embarrassed. "I didn't even ask how you were doing. Without details, I can't complain." Benjamin soaped himself. "You won't be interested in details." "Kathy, you both took your fingers out of his palm and took my purse." Needed to turn on her cell phone. She opened it and took out her cell phone, staring at the display confusedly. Quietly, she asked, "Married?" "Wasn't." "Not married," laughed Benjamin. "What so?" Kathy turned on her phone and put it in her purse. "Been waiting for you." He took a deep breath. "You're lying." Kathy committed the wine glass. "Did you hate me?" She looked him in the eye. "Yes, I did." Benjamin nodded. "And I was very angry that I couldn't stop loving you. That's how I confessed everything. Now it's your turn. Tell me about yourself." "He's nothing remarkable." Kathy waved her hand. "Being a homemaker, my diploma is considered a piece of paper in the land of misty Albion. What does your husband do?" "Stern represents the case in the courts." "Do you love him?" The hot food arrived, and they both fell silent. The waiter left the dish and walked away. Benjamin tapped the table impatiently with his fork. Kathy grabbed his wrist. "Eat. You won't touch the food." "Oh, yes." Benjamin refilled the glasses. He put the fork in his left hand, took the knife, and cut it into small pieces. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Benjamin put a white napkin to his lips and nervously held it in his hand. "You didn't answer my question." Kathy put down her plate and took a sip of wine. "No," she exhaled. "But he's a good man. Let's not talk about it. At least I have to go now." Benjamin nodded. He waved to the waiter and paid the bill. They left the cafe in a cold fall downpour. Benjamin caught an available cab and opened the back door of the car, covering Kathy with the edge of his coat. He flew to her lips. "Call me when you get there." He slipped his business card into her hand. "I will." Kathy got into the back seat. Benjamin slowed down a little and slammed the door behind her. The car moved off. Soon the light from its taillights dissolved into darkness. Benjamin stirred in his sleep, opened his eyes, and looked at his wife, sleeping next to him. The woman's hair fluttered across the pillow. He slid his lips over her naked shoulder and got out of bed. Carelessly threw on a robe, went down to the bathtub. After showering with wet mussed hair, he made his way to the kitchen. Brewed coffee with a steaming cup in hand, he walked to the window and opened it. In a MIG, the room was filled with our smells of spring. He took a sip of coffee, set the cup on the windowsill, and walked back into the bedroom. Kathy lay on her side, putting a hand under her head, and the thin rays of sunlight, reaching through the dense mountain, slid down her body. A whiff of icy wind brought the dreamer to his senses. The play of imagination was over. Benjamin sat up and fixed his gaze on the endless blue surface of the sea and the frowning sky, which was once again covered by heavy clouds. This was his life, joyless and empty with an unhealing heart wound. It could have gone on like this forever if not for one amazing event. It was a cool May night when an angel showed up at Benjamin White's apartment. Benjamin, formerly a successful businessman and now a drunkard, was wheezing loudly in his sleep. He had left his shipbuilding business to a trustee, and after the death of his parents in a dark drunkenness, he did not want to hear about returning to the former life and diligently portrayed himself as an ordinary citizen. Angel walked over to the bed, examining him up to his neck from the good physique. He sighed bitterly, and at that moment a light, barely respectful breeze blew through the apartment. Benjamin rolled over on his side and pulled an old tattered blanket over his head. Angel touched him and in a moment was inside his body. He rose up on the bed and opened his eyes. The solution of the internet networks began to resolve. The roar of cars, the thunder of endless music, cacophony of earthy sounds offensive to English hearing rushed into his consciousness. He took a deep breath, felt the heavy particles of lead and zinc sink into the bronze along with the air. Smelling the native odors of exhaust, his wife, plastics decomposing, and garbage made him dizzy and nauseous. He lifted Benjamin's body off the bed and tried to take a few steps around the room. The body was very heavy. In addition, everything inside him was groaning and aching. Angel regarded Benjamin's weakened arms and legs with amazement. He turned to the lonely mirror standing in the middle of the room and shuddered when he saw his reflection. Staring back at him was a bewildered, utterly powerless man of the earth with a flushed complexion and droopy eyes. "Jesus," he shouted out, pointing a shaking hand at the reflection in the mirror, "and I'm his guardian angel. This is a nightmare. They are the crown of the earth's creation. God, can they really be equal to us angels?" he asked in forbidding language, and immediately ashamed, remembering that it was because of this question and ended up in this harmful body. But it is unbearable, these physical sensations, this cloudy consciousness. It's impossible to live in this world. You were such a beautiful land. When I looked at you from above, Angel covered his face with his hands and cried quietly. As if agreeing with his sadness, the sky cried with him through the window insistently behind the drum of rain. Angel opened it joyfully, exposing his face to the cool and fresh wind and gathering the raindrops in his palms. The rain stopped suddenly. Angel sank down on the windowsill and with an inner gaze, immersed himself in Benjamin's body. The angelic powers left to him were negligible, and yet it transformed him, cleansed him of toxins, strengthened his blood vessels, and increased his circulation. "That's better." Angel exhaled. He looked around and walked over to the clothes closet. He opened it and picked out a decent suit. He threw off his worn sports tights and left shirt, took a shower, shaved his hair, and changed his clothes. Then he walked over to the dust-covered mirror, looked in it, and was pleased with what he saw. The reflection showed him a blush, a man with bright brown eyes, a stubborn, finely coarse mouth, and a strong-willed chin. He headed confidently for the front door, stepped out onto the landing, locked the door with the key, put it in his jacket pocket, and walked swiftly downstairs. After the rain, the air smelled of lawn and blooming lilacs. The streets glowed with colorful new lights. In spite of the deep night, the city's drinking establishments were bustling with revelry. And these people neglect even sleep to sin more. Angel marveled as he passed two drunken teenagers, arguing about the merits of their cars. Angel felt the anger boiling up inside each of them. He knew that in a few minutes a seemingly innocent altercation would escalate into a massive street brawl, injuring not only the disputants and their cars, but innocent bystanders as well. He turned down a dark, unlit alley, and with his fine angelic hearing, he heard in the distance a child's tearful crying. He ran quickly toward it. Soon he saw a small brick building, Next to it, leaning against the wall, sat a girl. The angel wanted to approach her, but suddenly stopped. A woman came out. "Sonia, little girl, what happened? Why did you run outside? It's so dark. And how did you manage to open the door?" The woman sat down next to the girl, hugged her, and pressed her to herself. "Well, tell me what happened." Lisa had chocolate waffles for her afternoon snack. "I hid them to give them to Vanya in the canteen tomorrow. He's my little brother. He likes sweets better because he's little." The girl buried her face in her knees and sobbed even harder. "Zhukova Anka took them away from me. And she said that if I told anyone or cried, she would make me dark. So I came out here at night so she wouldn't hear." The girl finishes with tears running down her cheeks. "I want to cry. It's a shame, isn't it? Baby, you're my golden girl. Come to my place. I'll give you tea and chocolate waffles. We're supposed to be submariners too. And luckily, I didn't eat them. We'll put Vanichkas aside. I'll distribute them in the morning. Adam's in the kitchen, and she'll give them to him personally from you. And from now on, let's make a deal. You'll keep all your sweets for your brother at my place, and we'll be safe, okay? Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. You're my visitor, too." Not childishly serious, thanked Sonia, standing up in nightgown from Prilopin and grass. Angel came out of the shade of the trees and sat down on a bench near the orphanage building. He could feel the breathing of the orphaned children in their sleep, saw how the girl Sonia raised waffles, and from the bread howled hot flavored tea from a glass. After a while, the woman and the child climbed the stairs. The angel heard the rustle of bedclothes and finally saw with his inner gaze as the sleepyhead fell asleep, smiling happily in her sleep. Quite imperceptibly, the first rays of the rising sun appeared in the sky. Its light cast reflections on the green trees. The city was waking up, and Lisa offered earnest prayers for her pupils, and went, curbed by a passion for wine, to drink her neighbor Benjamin. At 6:30 in the morning, she left the building, easily slung the strap of a lady's purse over her shoulder, and suddenly she stood frozen in place in surprise under the mighty old poplar trees. Benjamin was sitting on a bench, slightly askew from old age. "Benjamin, what are you doing here?" "I'm taking a walk in the fresh air," Angel answered, somewhat embarrassed. He moved slightly. "Would you like to sit next to me? Look how beautiful it is. You don't often see such things." He pointed to the huge pale moon disk that was receding over the horizon. Lisa slowly walked over to him and sat down. For a few minutes she admired the moonset. Then the angel turned to her and gazed at her with some unusual tenderness for a long time. "What a marvelous creature. Do moment these golden curls, Sasha, very much go to her green eyes and cheerful freckles. Probably everything in her image is aesthetically flawless." Lisa was embarrassed and looked away. "You're a strange one today, Benjamin. The way you talk to me. You're looking at me as if you're looking at me for the first time. It's really the first time I'm admiring your beauty." Lisa laughed. "No one has ever said that to me before. No one thinks I'm beautiful. On the contrary, more like a dunce, a stupid woman." The angel gently stroked the picture of the hand. "You are beautiful because your heart is rich in goodness and love." "Really?" Kitten's eyes involuntarily filled with tears. "Is that the main thing?" "That's exactly what it is. Somewhere I heard a poet say, 'What is beauty? It's a vessel in which there's emptiness, or a flickering fire in a vessel.'" The angel suddenly perked up. "Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa. I think I have to go." He stood up and walked quickly away. Zabolotski wrote it. Lisa whispered through her tears, staring at the rapidly receding figure of Benjamin. Benjamin turned away. In his dream, he was following a young man in white robes through a cynical field. A hot wind was blowing. Benjamin caught up with the wanderer, reached out to touch his fragile shoulder, and woke up. He sat up on the bed, listening to the sensations in his body. Strangely, the usual dopey headaches were absent. Benjamin opened his eyes, per usual, searching the room for the started bottle of vodka. There must be some left over from yesterday, he thought, much to his surprise that the urge for a hangover was not there. He came to the kitchen, opened the cupboard, and saw in a glass covered with a capron lid the unbeaten vodka. Benjamin brought the glass to the potatoes, and suddenly, with a sharp movement, poured its contents into the sink. Putin could not and would not. He made his way to the bathroom and stared at himself in amazement in the mirror. It seems that overnight I have become 5 years younger, he thought, stroking his smooth-shaven face and looking at his reflection. And why am I in a suit? Where did I squeeze in yesterday? Go down to the courtyard. Maybe someone saw me. Benjamin easily ran down the stairs and out into the courtyard. As usual, out-of-work men were sitting at a big wooden table, playing cards. "Benjamin, you're early today," said the girl who lives next door in the house across the street. "Sit down, you'll have a beer." Benjamin sat down on the glass with beer, resolutely pushed it away from him. The game stopped for a moment, and 8 pairs of eyes stared at him suspiciously. "Ties or something?" the man asked sympathetically. "I had too much to drink last night." "I don't know," Benjamin admitted sincerely. "I thought you'd tell me. Maybe you saw me yesterday. Where did I go?" "Not Benjamin. I didn't go out." "You answered that one. We were up till 10 o'clock at the point. Didn't see you. So unless you went out at night." "All right, thanks. Benjamin's up. Come on in just as we're getting into it," invited him in. The men rolled up the driveway in a friendly and loose manner. Benjamin bumped into Miranda, an old-age pensioner who lives in the apartment above Benjamin. "Miranda won't give a tip," the old lady interrupted him. "That's not what I meant. Why do you always ask? Is there a break today?" "For how long?" Miranda asked wryly. Benjamin started, waved at the woman, and entered the entryway. He was going up quickly when he saw his neighbor on the landing. Lisa was scrubbing the floors in the entryway. She deftly clutched a branch rag and left her image. "Hi," saying hello. "You're already hard at work. At least you got some rest tonight." "It's my entryway duty." "Where are you going?" "I slept a little." "What about you?" "I just got back." Lisa stared at Benjamin. Benjamin sat on the windowsill. "So you saw me going out last night?" "No, I didn't. I was on duty." "I saw you in the morning." Lisa wanted to tell him about their conversation at dawn, but something stopped her. "What morning?" "Yes, that's right." Lisa lowered her eyes. "I just thought you were out this morning." "What a miracle. I must have gotten there, but I don't remember how I spent the evening." "Maybe you wandered off into the night too." "I don't remember anything." Lisa looked regretfully at Benjamin in her ear, wiped the floor on the platform, and cautiously said, "Do you want to come to my place? I'll feed you breakfast." "You mean you want some more, how?" Benjamin felt that his appetite had been whetted. "A kind soul always feeds me. At least I used to say thank you when I was drunk." Lisa smiled. "Oh, Lisa, I can imagine what you thought of me." "Okay, you go upstairs, and I'll run to the bucket." Benjamin jumped up from the windowsill, easily picked up the bucket, and went down to the yard. Lisa went up to her apartment, washed her hands, and put the kettle on the stove. When Benjamin returned, he found Lisa in the hallway. She had already taken off her work robe and was tiredly pulling her handkerchief from her head. Benjamin put the empty bucket in the corner and turned to Lisa. And in a new way, as if seeing his so familiar acquaintance for the first time, Lisa stood opposite him and smiled at him very openly and gently. A strict white blouse emphasized the poverty of her skin. Her golden curls were loose on her shoulders. Benjamin was surprised that he had never noticed this femininity and beauty in Lisa before, and felt awkward because he could not take his eyes off her. "Benjamin, why are you standing there like a stumbling block? Come into the kitchen." He shuddered, woke up from his reverie, went into the kitchen, and sat down at the table. Lisa carefully set the table, poured Benjamin some tea, made sandwiches, and sat down across from him. "What's up?" "Well, I'm sorry, we're happy with what we have." She waved her hands in the air. "Uh-huh." Benjamin began to eat hurriedly, glancing furtively at Lisa. "Lisa, why don't you have anyone?" "Well, I mean men." Lisa looked sternly at Benjamin, got up from her chair, and went to the window. "An indiscreet question, Benjamin. Why don't you have anyone?" "Well, it's not fair to answer a question with a question. And then I've had women." Benjamin suddenly realized that the image of Kathy did not evoke in him today the usual pain and longing. The bright memory of the woman he loved flashed and vanished in an instant. Dana Lisa shook her head. "One for each night. Is that what you're like?" Benjamin laughed, criticizing. Lately he had indeed been bringing home different women and invariably parting with them in the morning. Lisa was embarrassed and turned away with her face to the window. "Yes, I know it's not sugar, and how can you love someone being in a drunken stupor all the time?" "That's what you're saying, Lisa." Benjamin sighed heavily, got up and approached Lisa. She turned around. Looking into her brilliant green eyes, he continued, "You may not believe me, but I got up this morning and thought I'd start my day as usual, hungover. But I couldn't." "How was it cut off?" "That pernicious urge disappeared. Why, I don't know. But it feels like forever. Except I don't have anything to do. I'm like a caged animal. I've got a lot of energy, but nowhere to put it. I don't have anywhere to put it. Tell me I didn't ask you to go to our boarding school. We need a gym teacher. We renovated the swimming pool, introduced swimming lessons, but there's no one to teach them. Can you teach kids to swim? Do you think they'll hire me with my dubious background and no special education? You bet they will." Lisa ran out into the bedroom and returned a minute later, clutching a stack of newspaper clippings in her hand. "Here, look at the pages of your biography." Lisa held out the clippings to him. The content was similar. Benjamin Lawman won first place in the regional competition. Benjamin Lawman took part in regional competitions and so on. This is a rarity. It was a long time ago. Benjamin tossed the clippings carelessly on the kitchen table, and now I have a different kind of fame. "So what are you doing now?" Lisa asked quietly, but she was willing to try. Benjamin looked at her, marveling at her persistence and concern. "Thank you for what?" "For believing in me. I'll give it a try. I'll come back tomorrow." He walked briskly to the front door. "Do you know what papers to get?" Lisa shouted after him. "I'll see you tomorrow." Benjamin slammed the door. He entered his dusty and long unsure apartment, quickly changed his clothes and started cleaning. Spent until 5 p.m., then had a quick snack and fell asleep instantly. Angel changed back into his Benjamin parade suit. It was still light when he went out into the courtyard. He strolled leisurely through the streets for several hours until he stopped in front of the window of a warranty store. In its reflection, he saw a young girl approaching. She approached the window and began to scrutinize the umbrellas displayed in it. From the girl's thoughts, the angel realized that she was a student, and just today she received her first scholarship. With it, she had long dreamed of buying a suitable umbrella. The girl opened her purse, counted the money, and resolutely entered the store. Through the glass window, Angel watched her actions. She quickly chose an umbrella and was about to pay when she came across a colorful school bag. The girl froze in indecision. The thing is that the younger sister of the student had long asked to buy her such a satchel. The family income was small, and the girl went to school with her older sister's old briefcase. Many classmates laughed at her for this. "I'm sorry, please," said the girl, pushes herself away the cherished umbrella. "I changed my mind. Give me that school satchel over there." She held out the money to the sales clerk. "Please," she replied. "It's the same price as the umbrella you chose." "I see." The student clutched the satchel to her chest and, smiling, ran out into the street. Angel followed her. The girl sat down in the streetcar for a while thinking, "I'll buy an umbrella sometime later. After all, it doesn't often rain outside, and Christopher endures ridicule almost every day." Now she would be delighted. It was as if Christopher sensed that her big sister was preparing a pleasant surprise for her. She instantly opened the door as soon as she rang the bell. "Hi, Emily. What are you late? Are you? We already had dinner. Here, bought you a present, little controller." Emily replied and pulled out a new satchel from behind her back. "Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness," Christopher shouted enthusiastically, carefully taking the gift from her sister's hands. "Dreams come true." She gave Emily a ringing smack on the cheek. Angel stood outside the student's house for a long time yet. He saw Christopher shifted in the satchel textbooks, notebooks, quickly dismantled the bed, lay down and immersed in dreams of tomorrow. She rejoiced as only children can rejoice, broadly and sincerely, with faith in the miracle, perceiving life as an endless holiday. At exactly 8:30 in the morning, Benjamin rang the bell at Lisa's apartment. Lisa opened the door, smiled charmingly at him. "Prody, I just need a minute." Lisa walked over to the mirror, trying to gather her hair at the back of her head. But the unruly strands were stubbornly dislodged from under the nook, with an inconceivable amount of curls falling over her face. Today she was wearing a strict gray suit and classic low-heeled shoes. Benjamin involuntarily admired the smooth movement of her arms, the supple, feminine figure. Closing the front door, Lisa turned to Benjamin. "All taken, yes, but with God." "With God," replied Benjamin. And holding hands, they walked quickly down to the courtyard. On the internet, everyday life was going on. Benjamin and Lisa passed the dining room where the children were having breakfast. They went up to the second floor and stopped at the principal's office. "I'm a little worried." Benjamin knocked. "Come in," a low female voice answered. Benjamin entered and closed the door behind him. Lisa sighed and slowly walked to her students' first class. 8:30 classes began. The third lesson was physical education. Lisa had already prepared to read an interesting book to the children instead. When one of the older students looked into the classroom, Lisa asked you to go down to the pool. Without hesitation, Lisa built the children in pairs, and they went down to the first floor. The water in the renovated pools played with sunny peaks. They were greeted by Principal Kathy. "Here is your new teacher." She pointed to Benjamin standing next to her. "Benjamin, please love and welcome. At last you'll have real swimming lessons." She smiled and walked away with dignity. The children made an unbearable noise, jumping around and happily rustling their bags of swimming gear. Lisa began to calm them down and led them to the locker room. After making sure all the kids had changed, she handed out inflatable laps and led them to the pool. Benjamin had already changed and was standing in the water one by one, taking the children in and dropping them in beside him. Before going down to the pool, the girl standing next to Lisa tugged her arm a little. "Lisa, what a great teacher we have now, like a rich man of fairy tales. What have you been reading to us?" "And cute." She awkwardly winked at Lisa with both eyes. "Yes, cute," Lisa whispered, glancing furtively at Benjamin. He lowered the enthusiastic sleepyhead into the water and said, "Thank you for your help. Lisa, have a seat on the bench, and we'll get the lesson started." Lisa sat down on a low bench near the wall and watched mesmerized as Benjamin led the class. The bottom of the pool was sloped, and the deepest part of the pool was fenced off with soft netting. The children spread freely around the perimeter, while Benjamin practiced with each one separately. Other children swam around them on inflatable laps. For the girl, the time flew by unnoticed. She kept a close eye on one of her pupils. Rick Lukov stood knee-deep in the water for the whole lesson without taking off the lap. Benjamin came up to him several times and asked him something. The boy stubbornly turned his head from side to side. When all the kids had gone up to the pool deck and were heading for the locker room, Benjamin approached Lisa and asked to leave Rick for the big break. He promised to bring him to the next class himself. Rick stood in front of Benjamin forcefully, clutching a rubber lap. "You're afraid of the water?" directly asked him Benjamin, very much so. Rick gritted his teeth. Benjamin looked at this skinny, sighing, desperate boy and moved closer to him. "And you can cling to my arm as well as to your inflatable lap." He stretched forward a strong, muscular arm and knelt down next to the boy. Rick awkwardly pulled off the circle and lay down on Benjamin's arm, wrapping his arms tightly around him. Benjamin surrounded Rick around him for several minutes, but how was it not a scary time? I was scared too, really. I chickened out. And then it got really interesting, and the fear went away. Let's go deeper. Yeah. Benjamin went deep into the pool, secured the net, and kept circling the boy. How are things going with your fear? He asked, smiling. Kind of scared, the child replied. But I'm with you. I'm keeping you safe. I can promise that you will be a good swimmer. Teach you. Go ahead. Rick raised his bright, hopeful eyes to Benjamin. Eyes visibly. Later, Benjamin led the boy into the classroom. Lisa had time to notice that both of them had a triumphant look. The bell rang for class. Caton's day passed in a hectic pace. She took the children to the cafeteria for lunch. She supervised the preparation of homework. After the evening walk and dinner, she took her students to the second floor sleeping quarters. When Lisa went downstairs, it was already dark. She entered her office and saw Benjamin sleeping peacefully on the couch. Trying not to disturb his sleep, the girl silently conjured up the door of the large valuable. She pulled from the shelf a blanket, with which she carefully opened Benjamin. After a little thought, she went up to the children's bedroom and lay down on the vacant bed. Angel squared his shoulders and hurried to the exit of the boarding school building. Kathy was coming down from the second floor. She slowed her step and leveled with him. Finished, Benjamin. Yes, you've had a hard day. But the kids are so happy. They need movement, activity. Angel nodded silently, and they walked outside together. I let the driver go today, or I would have taken you. I apologize, in a frightened tone, said the principal. Raised, you know, that and can give you me tonight. She said goodbye and walked forward through the poplar alley. Angel waited a little while and followed her. Kathy walked very fast until she stopped in front of a rusty, long, unpainted gate. She made a mess of them. Two guys were walking towards her, pushing a wheelchair ahead of them. You kept us waiting, said one of them. You're paying for your wasted time. I was only 10 minutes late. I paid in advance. What's your complaint? She replied. Here are our claims. Claimed. The other pushed in the direction of Kathy, the wheelchair, delivering herself to her destination, and thereupon the young men withdrew as far as they could. Kathy, she lay down on the wheelchair and rolled it along the street. Pulling into the courtyard of a shabby wooden matrimonial house, she knocked on the door of one of the apartments, and a gray-haired, slightly stooped elderly woman answered it. Oh, Kathy, you come in, come in. No, Camille, you're the one who's coming out with John. She pointed to the stroller. Oh, he's asleep already. Let's go wake him up. The two women went into the house. They woke up a light-haired boy of about 17. They carried him under their arms into the yard and put him on the stroller. Camille turned on the porch light. John quickly mastered his new means of transportation, drove out onto the road and rolled forward to whistling bravura tunes. Kathy breathed in the fresh night air. Now Camille John can walk on his own. Thank you. Don't worry, Kathy. We'll probably pay in installments. John doesn't have a disability. I can't get him, and I didn't have anything to deliver him on. I wanted to go to the hospital alone beforehand. Yes, I'm afraid to leave him in case something bad comes into my head. Well, I don't need anything from my pension. Kathy interrupted her. It's a gift. The main thing is to make his life a little happier. Kathy waved goodbye to John and went home. Oh, our benefactor is noisy. Camille sighed after her. God bless her. She crossed herself fervently. It was already the first hour of the night when Kathy got tired, sank down on a bench near her house, and thought for a long time. She thought about her son Robert. For the past 2 years, her relationship with him had not worked out. He tried to do everything against his parents, introduced dubious acquaintances, was rude, drank a lot of alcohol. Under the threat of leaving home, he demanded to buy him a motorcycle. Kathy has long been saving money to fulfill his demands, and thereby at least somehow to establish relations with his son. And this morning, without a drop of regret, she spent the money she had bought to buy a wheelchair for the young man who had been in a serious accident and lost the ability to walk. What am I going to do with a low one? She thought. Mom, are you okay here? She heard the voice of her son, sitting alone and in the dark. Dennis came out of the shadows and sat down next to her. Kathy remained silent. A mother's heart clenched in anticipation of the usual bards. Man, Robert said softly, I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry to you. Kathy flinched in surprise, and while she woke up on the bench, Robert stood up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't need no motorcycle. Just, I'm sorry. You'll forgive me. He walked over to his mother and put his arm around her shoulders. Kathy covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Angel stood nearby and watched the embraced mother and son walk into the entryway. He knew what had caused such a sudden change in the young man. Today, one of Dennis's friend's father had died suddenly. And seeing the grief of his comrades, he realized a lot of things. In the morning, Lisa caught Benjamin walking from the pool shower. He cleverly rubbed his back with a large terry towel. And Lisa, and I had time for a swim. He gave her a friendly wink when she fell asleep on your couch last night. Where did you sleep last night, my dear? I'm in the bedroom with the girls. My shift's over. Why don't we go home together? She suggested it. Wait, I'll be right back. Benjamin went into the locker room and in a few minutes returned dressed in tracksuits, sneakers. He came close to Lisa and, a little embarrassed, said, It's a day off today. I wanted to invite you to go out of town. It's about 30 minutes by train. I have a house. I inherited it from my parents. Benjamin stared at Lisa, listening to the rumble of the train wheels and looking out the window at the tender spring greenery. Lisa and Benjamin looked at each other occasionally and were silent. Each was thinking about something else. Lisa had been in love with Benjamin since high school. There was a time when the whole town was proud of his athletic accomplishments. Lisa collected all the newspaper magazine articles about his accomplishments. Every day she saw him at school, surrounded by ultra-fashionable high school students, and knew her love was hopeless. The likelihood of Benjamin paying attention to her was zero. And then he fell desperately in love with Kathy. Idolized her, never left her side. But still Lisa thanked Providence for the fact that at least furtively, but can see his smile, hear his laughter. Then he went to the army, and she knew nothing about him for more than 10 years. It was an incredible coincidence that years later Lisa got an apartment from the boarding school in the same building where her idol lived. So much time had passed, and she was not surprised that Benjamin did not recognize her. After all, he had never paid attention to the skinny 7th grader with adoring eyes that looked at him. Life had decreed that his idol had fallen, and he was unrecognizable. But in Lisa's soul there was no contempt or disgust for him. She strove to help Benjamin. Sometimes during long periods of drunkenness, she was the only one of his acquaintances who dared to enter his den. Bring food, take out the trash. If anyone called Benjamin an alcoholic, Lisa's heart clenched pitifully. She prayed for his soul, but he looked at her as if through a wall. And now he sat across from her, so close in the dazzling white, with red stripes tracksuit that suited him so well. He looked at her with an affectionate gaze, and she felt that she liked him very much. His former indifference was replaced by admiration and care for her. To Lisa it was a real miracle, of which she was a little afraid. Benjamin, for his part, pondered when this pinching, thick as golden honey, love for Lisa had filled his soul. He had never once hugged her or kissed her lips, but he felt very happy in her presence. He could not understand what attracted him to this woman. Lisa sat across from him, wearing plain blue jeans and a simple flapper, then a paper blouse and a small flower. Her unruly curls were once again disheveled from the ponytail, gathered at the back of her head. She wrinkled her nose funny, eyes from the sleeping sunlight, and he felt that in the whole world he had no one more dear to him. More, his heart for years dissolved in the beautiful pictures in his eyes. A small wooden house with sad heating stood on the outskirts of the village. Benjamin opened the wicket gate. "Come in and make yourself at home." Lisa with difficulty made her way into the yard, pushing back the nipples, the necks, the branches of fruit trees with her hands, and approached the dilapidated long well. Benjamin followed her. He drew water from the well, carried an aluminum mug from the house, filled it from a bucket, and held it out to Lisa. "How icy is it?" Lisa was surprised, taking a sip and handing the mug to Benjamin. He took the mug from her hands and suddenly laughed. What a fool I was to invite a woman I liked. It looked all around the slumbering corner. All this Benjamin is correctable, with a flexible female gaze and the proper male strength. Lisa took Benjamin's hand, and they entered the house. All day long they labored joyfully and happily. Benjamin cut down the trees, burned the dry limbs, removed last year's grass on the property, fixed the warped doors, and sunk the bathhouse. Lisa cleaned the house, washed the windows, hung curtains, knitted by Benjamin's mother's own hand, when she finished cutting the lettuce. But Benjamin came back from the bath, greedy, sleeping in a cool well of water. He looked around. What a beauty! It was like a fairy tale house. "Only one thing is missing," Lisa said, pointing to a corner. "Look, your mom had a shelf here for samples." Benjamin wondered. "Lisa, there were images. My grandmother was a believer. My mother took me to church. I remember taking communion in church." "How do you remember?" "I don't know. I was about 3 or 4 years old. You know, the local temple has preserved it and now holds services in it." Benjamin walked over to a heavy wooden chest and opened the lid. He pulled out a few old icons from his day. "These are the ones I remember having." He held them out to Lisa. She took a dry, clean rag, carefully lost them, and put them on a corner shelf. Now that was all. Lisa crossed herself in front of the images and turned to Benjamin. "I wish I could light a candle or a lamp. You look in the wonder chest. I'll go to the bath." When Lisa returned, she found the door slightly open and looked into the room. Benjamin was putting lighted lamps on a shelf. "Lord, forgive me." He covered his face with his hands. "How much time in my life have I wasted?" he whispered. Lisa came in quietly and began setting the dishes on the table. "Let's have dinner." "Benjamin, come on." He sent for the table. They talked all night long. Lisa spoke frankly about how she had followed Benjamin's fate. He was silent about his past, sharing only that he had recently gotten rid of his ailment one fine morning, wanting to experience life in its fullness. I burned with a spatula in front of the images. She started matchmaking. They went out of the wicket. In front of them lay a wide green, still field. In the distance, the wind and swayed the tops of trees. A bright pink dawn was dawning. "Lisa," Benjamin took his hand. "You will marry me." Lisa shook her head negatively. "I haven't told you everything. I can't have children at all. Never. That's why my husband left me." Large tears rolled down from the vivid pictures of their classroom. Benjamin changed a little. "If you want to, go ahead and let Rick adopt. I like that boy. How about you?" he asked. "Benjamin." Lisa hugged him impulsively. "Which one are you?" Lisa happily snuggled into his chest. "Which one? Which one are you?" And he stroked her thick hair affectionately. Angel slowly argued over waking up with the earth, admiring the dazzling beauty of this planet. Suddenly, his entire being exulted you. Sensing the approach of the Creator, he entered the presence of God, and a silent dialogue took place between them. "Your mission is over. And what do you think of people now? There are some among them who are worthy of your favor. Why have you changed your mind? I am the guardian of the ages. I have grown to love them. And what of your ward? He is a great sinner, and yet you left him a piece of your holiness." The angel flew around, unable to explain what he'd done. "Why are you embarrassed? I have nothing to reproach myself for. I'm like that myself. You are a joy even now." Angel felt his strength return to him completely. In his inner sight, he saw the blue domes of a small village temple drowned in lush greenery and Benjamin standing in front of the priest confessing him. Silent but perfect joy completed the whole being of the angel, and he continued his flight circling in a slow, smooth dance. And at this time, one of the cosmonauts of the Russian orbital station observed an unusual phenomenon. He saw rhythmically shining in the distance of the stellar space stripes of bright white color. Something you asked the partner who arrived to replace him. The star is dancing, he replied absent-mindedly. Partner sailed to the porthole, lightly pushed his colleague in the shoulder, and covering the space panorama with his head. After a few minutes, he turned around and said, "There's nothing out there. The haze and the cold. Go get some rest. You're obviously exhausted." 10 minutes later, he looked into his partner's quarters. The astronaut seemed to be fast asleep, but suddenly opened his eyes and, smiling, said, "She was dancing after all." Benjamin had long since awakened and watched the sweet sleep on his arm. "Rick." The boy studied, got out of bed, and rubbed his eyes with his hands. "Dad, I dreamed about angels." "You did? And what did they tell you?" asked Benjamin, rubbing his aching hand. Rick jumped out of bed and shuffled his large homemade folders into the kitchen. He came back with a glass of water and sat down on the couch. "And nothing, they don't have a speech machine." "No what?" Benjamin marveled. "But I understood them," Rick continued. "They were happy about us and said I'd have a baby sister soon." "They misinformed you." The front door shrieked and Lisa, who had returned from duty, walked in. "They're awake." "Yeah," Benjamin answered. "Lisa, our son's been dreaming about angels. They say he's going to have a baby sister." Lisa sat down in the chair and stretched out the rest of her legs. "They told him the truth, didn't they?" A joyful twinkle in his eye, she answered. Benjamin's eyebrows rose in surprise. He got up from the sofa, dressed silently. Then he walked over to his wife, sat down on the windowsill chair, leaned over, and kissed her soft pink lips. Rick also walked over to Lisa and asked thoughtfully, "Will you love me less when she is born?" "Silly, my foot child." Lisa pulled him close to her. "My love is enough for everything." She got up from the chair. "Let's go wash up and have breakfast, since you're up so early." Benjamin looked thoughtfully at Lisa and her son, then went into the bedroom, closed the door behind him, and raised his moist eyes to the iconostasis of the house. His throat constricted with a surge of emotion. He knelt down and whispered softly, "Thank you. Amazing story," said Benjamin Lawman, sneaking a tear from his eye. "This story is worthy of print." He grinned. "Are you a real talent?" "It's plausible enough." "Well, except for the presence of the angel. You have a very fertile imagination. But I think he was present in this story, and when we met, you know, more than 10 people walked past you when you were lying there on the sidewalk, and I was the only one who approached you. Yeah, maybe you're right. It wasn't the sudden change of climate and low blood pressure that made me sick. I just fainted. People thought I was some kind of boom, although I was wearing a very expensive suit at the time." Benjamin laughed. "I have to tell you that it was Lisa who initiated the venture when I told her everything, and we talked about my past all night. She thought it was the most important thing to take that step, to ask for forgiveness. And the logical conclusion, in my opinion, was for Kathy to take possession of the yacht. But it only lasted a few hours. She reissued it to you the same day. That's how God directed you to reward me for my rescue the day before. I guess the angels really did guide us. How else do you explain these twists of fate?" "I absolutely agree with you, Benjamin. If it weren't for your guidance, I would hardly have written such novels. You're a great fortune in my life." Benjamin walked over and took Adriana's hand. Together, they walked to the side of the ship. The quiet turquoise sea stretched out before them. A gentle, warm breeze ruffled their hair. Both were happy and content with life. Benjamin was free of past resentments. An idea for a new novel was born in Adriana's mind.